Three, two, and one. All right, and welcome back to the Reserve Squad Midweek Show, a soccer podcast covering all things in the EPL from a bench perspective. I'm your host Ben, and I can actually say welcome back because we have been gone for a little bit. I think our last show was Boxing Day, so all the stuff that's happened in 2023, we haven't really talked about yet. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do basically a review show because I think we're like at the halfway point. So I think that's pretty fitting. But we'll try to get to some of the games that we've missed. And we definitely have a few things to say about a couple of the teams that are kind of making headlines. Some for good reasons, like maybe yours, Rex, and then my team isn't necessarily for the best of reasons. So we're gonna get that out of the way, and I'm pleased to be joined by my co-anchor, co-pilot, because it seemed you were under the weather for a little bit. Good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I lost my voice, had laryngitis for about 3 weeks. Actually, Ben was with me on New Year's Eve when I started to lose it, and it's just now coming back. So I've had a lot of things I wanted to talk about, especially with the Premier League and all the games, but couldn't talk literally. So I'm excited to be back. And excuse my gravelly voice; it's still coming back. But this is the best it's been in like 3 weeks. So thanks, Ben, for bearing with me. And I mean, hopefully this voice gets even better because it still isn't 100%.
Oh, I think you sound pretty good. You still got the pipes. Maybe actually with the mic, it'll be the best you sound. So
Maybe.
we'll see how this works. This is kind of a different show than what we've done in the past, so we'll just try to wing it and not make it too cringe. I think one thing we can do though is stick with kind of like the outline that we've done in the past. So kind of just get started with maybe a story of the week, or I guess maybe story of the month, because a lot of things have happened. Not it's mostly an EPL show, but we did speak a lot about U.S. soccer, during the World Cup, and there was a couple storylines that happened with them that we can maybe touch on. The U.S. team actually does return, I think tomorrow, or sometime this week for little bit of a January camp. So we can maybe touch on that a little bit at the end. I don't know if you want to talk about the Geo news, Rex, or not. We can maybe table that for next week after,
Yeah.
or not. I mean, a lot has come out since then, so maybe it's good we didn't have a show then because a lot of stuff just completely changed. It seemed every day something else was breaking. But I'm going to get started with something a little more EPL focused, and this may be a little doomsday or not, but I think the Pep and Klopp kind of cycle that I would argue that the thing that dominated soccer discourse, the main character, main storylines, after Messi and Ronaldo was I just thought Klopp versus Pep, that kind of rivalry, and I think that's coming to an end. And I think it's fine that cycles don't last forever. I do think part of it is Liverpool's ownership has kind of let Klopp down, but in a different part, I want to say that both managers have a stubbornness to them, and I think it's finally caught up to them. And the stubbornness is the reasons why they've been as good and successful as they've been. But it's a stubbornness in different ways. So what I want to say is with Pep, he is so terrified of being counted on or losing in transitions. He doesn't want his wingers to be wide players, and he doesn't want his wingers to try to take people on. It's very he likes to recycle possession basically in a team's final third and to basically outnumber them that way. And I think not playing with direct players, I think is finally catching up with them. They sold Jesus and Sterling. Even selling Zinchenko has kind of I think backfired on them. And with Klopp, I think it's just been not really changing tactics and having too much loyalty to players that have basically got him to where he's been. But it's come out that basically some of the turmoil that's come out with the scouting directors kind of leaving the club is Klopp kind of stepped in and gave Henderson an extension. Milner's gotten a couple extensions, the last couple of years when that shouldn't have happened. And and when Klopp has talked about how he didn't need to bring in players, he had a number of midfielders. The midfielders that he has cannot do the things that he wants them to do anymore, whether it's age or injury or what, ability, fitness wise. And I think all that's kind of come out to hurt them as well. And then lastly, I put it's not always greener on the other side, and this is referring to Graham Potter. I don't think you can necessarily blame Chelsea's mess on Potter. himself because he's playing with Tuchel's players in that respect. But at the same time, Potter did kind of ask to leave a club like Brighton, and it's you don't want to fault someone for being ambitious and wanting to maybe challenge themselves a little bit more. He definitely earned it.
Mhm.
I think we talked about that when it happened, but at the same time, he left a club that was very. It felt like it was very sustainable. I want to say safe, secure. Maybe would be a better word for it to the most probably unsecure, unstable club in the last couple of seasons, especially with managers. They go through managers. It seems like one or two a season, and that was with the old ownership. And the new guy fired Tuchel five games
Yeah.
into the season. So you knew what you were joining, and it's one of those coming home come to the roost. But it does seem like since I wrote that because I did the script like a couple weeks ago that the owner is going to back him with whatever he needs, and he's brought in some players. So he does have some of his guys to kind of join that, and so I don't know that's kind of setting it up. What did you want to talk about, Rex?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about Chelsea also.
Hmm.
I mean, they're in 10th place. Potter's old team, Brighton, is 4 places above them in sixth. So,
Hmm.
yeah, maybe not green. The grass is not greener on the other side. But mainly, I'm just interested with Chelsea and just all the players they've bought already this January window, and that's including Mudryk, who could be up to 108 million, which is just that's a lot for a player in the January window. But I mean, he looks like he could be worth it. But if they don't qualify for the Champions League, this is a lot of cash injected into the January window. I mean, we're going to talk about each league basically how much they've spent, and the Premier League is so far ahead in money spent, so they kind of maybe they feel like they have to, but I mean, it's ridiculous the amount of players they've brought in. Badia Shele, I think
Hmm.
that's how you pronounce his name. Mueke as well, and then another Fafana. I mean, and then obviously the big one is Mudryk. So I mean, if they don't qualify for the Champions League, they don't get that money. Some of these guys, I don't know that like if they're grasping at straws because it kind of seems like maybe Aubameyang is not going to do much, and that's kind of one of those spots where it's like, whoops.
Hmm.
But they do tend to have so much capital, so much income that they can make mistakes and be okay. But if they don't qualify for the Champions League, I don't know. It's going to be a very interesting summer. Maybe Potter's gone after that. Like you said, any manager at Chelsea is going to have a short leash. So I don't know. It just feels like with Chelsea, it's just like check back in 6 weeks, see what happens because
It
there's
really
so much
does, yeah.
change. It's last year we thought Lampard was fine. He's fine. He's fine. Oh, he's fired. What? Like, oh, so it could be something like that too. Yeah, I don't know. Some of these buys, I don't know. Are they grasping at straws? Are they over? They're overpaying because obviously Shakhtar was like, Chelsea are desperate. Let's hike up the price. So I don't know. It's interesting, but they have the money. It seems like, or at least Abramovich did to buy a lot and have some big misses on there. But I don't know. We'll see, Ben. It's interesting.
Well, it's you mentioned Mudryk, and would the most interesting thing to hear is I actually do like him going to Chelsea, and he looked very good versus Liverpool
Yeah.
coming on,
Mhm.
because he's got this like sprinter, he's got the sprinter pace to him, sprinter quickness that you don't necessarily see a lot of that in wingers these days. As weird as that is to say, because teams kind of like playing with inverted, like narrow-minded players that are maybe and I can't really explain why we've kind of gone away from this, but he's got a directness to him. He reminds me a little bit like Mane back in the Southampton days. Um,
Mm.
but the thing that's interesting about that contract is they signed him for like 8 years. And
Yeah.
haven't seen things like that before. And UEFA actually just came out and said, "You're not gonna be able to do this anymore." It's a way to kind of balance out the books a little bit better. Easy to pay 100 million over 8 years and like
Over
four.
8 years and four. Yeah.
Yeah. And UEFA's like, you can't do that anymore. I think they said 4 or 5 from now on. So Chelsea just in that one transfer, or maybe they might have even done that with David Fofana, the striker. But they're not done. There's still talks. They're trying to get Enzo Fernandez, which would be
God.
100 million, and then I saw that they're seriously trying to get this right back Gusto. I think at Lyon. And this to me would make them more sense than any of the other transfers because they need cover for Reece James. I
Mhm.
think they've been really hurting with that. I don't necessarily think the Cucurella signing has worked out with cover for Chilwell.
Mhm.
But the fact that they went all year without addressing that has been weird to me. We're going to get to Southampton and Man City later on. I think uh, they played each other in a FA Cup or Carling Cup game, and
Yeah.
Kyle Walker Peters was amazing, and he can play both left and right. I think they missed out on not getting him.
Mm.
But that's kind of throwing that out there. We'll definitely get to Chelsea because there's a
They
lot there's a lot to talk about.
There's a lot, and they
With
do have a lot of injuries too. To be fair,
they do.
and like you said, like they should have done cover for Reece James because he's so important to them that if
Yep.
he's gone, you're going to be in trouble. So that that's kind of like their fault, I guess. But they do have incredible amount of players hurt, and I mean, it's not hard, but at the same time, I mean, it's not easy, but at the same time, he's got the backing at least, and you got an owner that's willing to shell out. I mean, if they bought two $100 million plus players in one window, like that's insane. So at least he's backed by cash flow,
Yeah.
more cash flow than at Brighton, I guess. But like he might be out of a job where he would be safe and secure at Brighton, probably for who knows, as long as he want to stay there, probably.
Well, one thing, I mean, Potter also had a really good team basically at Brighton. I think he actually has brought a couple of those guys to Chelsea. So we'll see if some of that scouting does change, where they don't necessarily go for the big names. We'll get to Man City later on. Man City just bought a player in the Argentine league, a midfielder, and like you look at Brighton's team, that's basically all Brighton have done. They've been able to create an entire team by scouting in leagues that just other people just didn't even think to look at.
Mhm.
So it's
Yeah,
possible you can do things that way. You mentioned the January transfer window spending, and I think this is a good way to kind of transition here because when I saw these numbers, and this was before, I think this was maybe a week ago, so it's probably even worse at this point. But the
these are
Premier
like eye
League's
popping.
yeah, the Premier League so far is 320 million. La Liga is 19 million. Bundesliga, and this is net. La Liga is 19 million. Bundesliga is 16 million, and Ligue 1 is 10 million, and Serie A is at 6 million. And this is all because of the TV contracts that the Premier League has. And so, in some ways, we already have a Super League, and you're seeing teams like Aston Villa or Everton, poach Dan Juma on Villarreal. I think Aston Villa is trying to go for Nico Williams at Atletico Bilbao. You're able to kind of
Mhm.
poach players from other leagues, and it's not the big boys that are doing it. In some respects, and so I do think the English language maybe helps with that as well. But the main thing is that TV revenue is shared to all 20 clubs in the Premier League, where that's not the case in La Liga. La Liga decided to allow Barcelona and Real Madrid to basically run roughshod over everyone else, and I think you've lost interest in that. They didn't have uh, they just figured the two clubs were bigger than anyone else. They didn't realize that really the thing that was driving the league all those years was Messi and Ronaldo. And it
Mhm.
doesn't seem like they had a plan, since especially after losing Messi. The Bundesliga, it seems like everyone is just trying to help Bayern win Champions League or win titles. I just saw that Bayern have just poached, and they're about to get Conrad Leimer on Leipzig, and I just saw that they're getting the Gladbach keeper to replace Manuel Neuer.
On
Um,
summer, yeah.
yeah, and so that is what it is. League On to me is very interesting because it's not just PSG running the show over everyone else, but that just is a league where there is a lot of talent there. It's just teams aren't necessarily organized that well. So you can poach maybe individual players, but it requires uh, individual scouting. It requires a profiling, I would say, and some clubs have actually done that and done well. You mentioned Batishil. I think Batishil came from a league on,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, a couple guys in the summer too. They got some good young players that they get poached. Say Maxman, was it seems like too they
yeah,
got a
doing
lot of
well.
like quick wingers. Pepe's another one. A lot of quick wingers over there.
Huh? And so that's kind of just where we are. There's still I think a week to go in the transfer window, and the when you look at where everyone's kind of linked at, it really is just kind of Premier League clubs these
Yeah.
days. And so you figure it's going to become worse, not better.
And it's funny you make that point because like I used to literally would like go and search on Google like you know transfer news for like all the leagues, and now I just go EPL transfer news. I don't even care about the other ones because there's nothing going on.
I mean, Bournemouth. I think it's maybe I shouldn't use this as an example because I think their owner is part owner of Lyon. But Bournemouth just got a winger in Dango uh, Odeyawa, Odatora. And he's a 21-year-old winger. He was at Lorient, and just
Oh
it's.
boy.
I think they brought him for like $20 million, and it's just it's a club like this that is getting someone like that, and I I think it was like a Who Score the website, but it was one of these things that basically had their as far as like player stats. They did a World 11 at least this far. I think it was up to the World Cup break, and he was on it for under 21 players, kind of performing. And so yeah, he'll be another name to kind of watch. He had a debut this past weekend, and already had a big assist to help them get a draw. But it's like clubs like Bournemouth are now poaching from other leagues, and that's just
Yeah,
we didn't used to see that. Um,
true. Yeah, that's a good point.
and
Yeah,
so
a lot more competition.
And so some of the moves that we have already seen. Chelsea got Mudryk. You mentioned Batishil. They also got Felix on loan, and he looked incredible until in his debut versus it was either Palace. It might have been Fulham, and then in the second half he got a red. So they only have him for I guess whatever the 20 games or whatever it is, and they're going to miss him for three already. He had to miss the Liverpool game. Arsenal, they were linked to Mudryk, but they brought in. It looks like they put money for Mudryk, and because they didn't get him, they've gone for Trossard, Jacob Kiwire, I believe, is a center back who played in the back three. He was at the United game, so I think that
Mhm.
maybe isn't official, but they're about to get him, which is an interesting signing. And I think
I
they're
think it was
linked.
official
I think they're linked
yesterday.
to a right
I think.
back from like Valencia or somewhere in,
Mhm.
in La Liga. Um, Brentford brought in Kevin Schad, a striker in the Bundesliga, and that's another thing. Brentford
Pacey.
Brentford are now poaching from the German
Mhm.
league. Man
He's
United
incredibly fast.
Man United brought in Wout Weghorst. Leeds, I think he's still a Burnley player actually, so it might be Malone. Leeds brought
Mhm.
in
He
Max
is, yeah.
Weber, Jorginho Rutter. Rutter is a striker, also I think at Hoffenheim. Liverpool brought in Gakpo and no midfielder, which I think is we'll get to that. I think that's a mistake. And then Wolves have brought in Mateus Cunha and Pablo Sarabia, and then
Yeah.
Bournemouth with
Danish
Dango
international.
Odeawa. So there's already been a ton of moves that have happened already, and again, we're just going to focus on the EPL. And we expect more to come. I mean, we kind of expected it to be kind of wild, a little bit more of a wild January than it maybe in past years because of the World Cup. We thought maybe teams didn't want to
Mhm.
move. You didn't want to necessarily unsettle and maybe go to a place where you wouldn't play. But now that's over, I do think, and you got clubs that are maybe hurting from revenue still from COVID. I think you're going to see a pretty big January window. And so
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
the table right now we have Arsenal on 50, with top of the table. It's not Christmas anymore. This is a real thing, and we'll definitely get your thoughts on that, Rex. 45 with Man City, so City's at second. They're so close. Um, and then kind of there's starting to be a little gap here. Newcastle on 39, and then Manchester United on 39. And then you kind of have a who's who. I think Spurs are at 33 points. Brighton is close with 31. Fulham is tied with 31. And then you have Brentford. Brentford's on 30 points, and Brentford are ahead of Liverpool and Chelsea. And that is,
Mhm.
of all the things to think about at this point in the season, I don't think any of us would have predicted that. So credit to
And
Brentford,
Fulham and Brighton
and,
too.
and also
It's crazy.
true. Actually, I should maybe say that about Fulham. Um, yeah,
Yeah, they've
that's
been great.
because if Fulham had beaten Spurs yesterday, I think they would have been fifth. And then maybe would have even
Yeah.
overtaken Spurs.
No, they
And
would have been 2 points behind Tottenham, so they would have been at six, but
okay,
knocking on the top four, which is
yeah.
insane.
And then, yep, Liverpool and Chelsea kind of round off the top 10, and they're even on points at 29. But that's a pretty big gap. They're basically 10 points from fourth, and that's not going to be easy. Liverpool maybe have a game in hand on Spurs. I
Yeah.
don't think they have a game in hand on United. They have a game in hand on Newcastle as well.
Oh, they do have a game on United as well,
Okay.
just not Arsenal. And they have a game in hand on Chelsea right now too.
So for our EPL review show, we don't necessarily have to hit all of these because we're going to have Jeremy on. But our top, I guess I'll just kind of get started with mine. This is maybe like kind of a humble pie moment. But for top four predictions, I did have City, but I had Liverpool in second. I will say I had Arsenal in third, and I'm actually looking back. I'm pretty happy about that because that wasn't necessarily the easiest thing to call. A lot of people wanted to, put in Chelsea or maybe Man United or some other. Actually, United's actually that turning out to be not that bad of a prediction either. And then I think I had Spurs. And that could maybe still happen, but definitely I don't think Liverpool's gonna finish in the four.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I don't know about. Man, well, I had Liverpool first. No, actually, I had City first. Sorry, Man City, then Liverpool, then Arsenal, and then Chelsea. Mistakenly Chelsea, but that was before injuries and stuff. But I don't know. I just thought Chelsea with the backing, like the financial backing, and
Yeah, they did spend a
I don't
lot
know.
in the
And
summer.
yeah, they spent a lot. So
It
and
was
Tuchel, I
Tuchel's
thought,
Chelsea at that point.
yeah, I thought they'd be okay. I thought they'd be in the top four. But I don't know. I mean, I still I still think it's too early for Arsenal. I don't want to celebrate it yet, but yeah,
Yeah,
I'm glad to pick. We both got at least Arsenal in the top four, right? So
we'll definitely get to them. I mean, this could maybe have some kind of a debate or not. I mean, who's your player of the season so far?
what I mean, I'm not being very original, but it's got to be Holland for me. Just
Yeah.
25 goals. Was he have like five hat tricks already? I mean, I know he's got like the team is built to like service him the ball, so he gets the ball a bunch. And some games he doesn't have many touches, but he does really well with the touches he has. I mean, there's a lot of other players that maybe I wasn't expecting to like be doing that well, and could be like shout outs too. Like Mitrovic and Tony, Miguel Almiron's playing really well.
Hmm.
But just 25 goals already is insane. He's putting up crazy numbers. A bunch of hat tricks. At times, he's putting City on his back too. I don't know. So it's got to be Holland. It's not very original, but I don't know. Just 25 goals, man. That's crazy.
And
He's gonna break all sorts of records.
to
You'd
put
think.
that in perspective, Salah got the Golden Boot last year, and he won it with 24 goals.
Mm,
So he's already passed that
insane.
mark. I think the record is 32 goals, and yeah, he's
Yeah.
probably going to destroy that. So
Yeah. He's
yeah,
not far off that.
I think that's a good answer. I went with Kane. And so because I don't know where Spurs would be without Kane, to be honest. And I looked at his expected goals. His expected goals are at 11, and he's at 15 or 16. So he's crushing that. And I just when you watch Tottenham, there's just because he doesn't have Son helping him this year. It really is a one man show, and he's carrying them to at least they're still in touch striking distance of finishing top four somehow. And just
Yeah.
you look at how the team you don't really see any of the any creative players like next to him, and he just it's probably one of the more impressive seasons that I've seen from someone at least to this date. And then I went cheeky. I put Thomas Partey for my second choice, and it's kind of a weird one, but I just think if you guys lost Partey, I don't think the way Arteta has the squad structured, I don't think it would work. Because the way
Yeah.
he uses Xhaka, the way Odegaard has kind of a free role, Partey is almost like that anchor, and so it's kind of lame, but I kind of just went with that.
I like that. That's like out the box. Yeah,
And
he's a very important player, no doubt about it.
yeah, and he had a he played couple roles. I think he had like the assist, versus Spurs. I think he had a couple. Like he might have had a role to play in one of the goals for United. So it's just one of those things where he's just good at. He's always good positionally, and he's just always good at just winning the ball back. But he's aggressive with his passing. He's unique. And so it is what it is. Um, who's your manager of the season to this point?
Oh man, well, I think for me it was between Eddie Howe and Arteta, and I think I'm gonna go with Eddie Howe just because Newcastle is it's not quite as big of a club as Arsenal. They're still a huge club, obviously, but just not as big as Arsenal. And we thought that they would do well, but like some of these unbeaten streaks that they're putting together are crazy. A lot of draws, but that's fine. And I think I don't know. He's just kind of it's the perfect match. It kind of feels like. It feels like Eddie Howe when he was at Bournemouth in the EPL in the beginning there, before things started to like fade away. But they're doing pretty well, and they bought a lot of players, but like we always say, it's not like not splashing a lot of cash on one player. They're kind of spreading it out, and they've kind of gotten the right players for what the system they play requires. So yeah, for me, it's Tao, but Arteta's doing a great job too. But he's just got. I feel like he has a little bit more talent there all around, and bench included than Newcastle does. So that kind of just gave Eddie Howe the edge for me.
I like it. No, and I definitely think Arteta is definitely deserving. I mean, he's on a Centurion pace at the minute, and just it's still a relatively young squad. I think Arteta is definitely a fair answer. Just to kind of speak on how. I put down three. How was one of them. Uh, they're at 11 goals conceded at this point. And what you mentioned his time at Bournemouth. What I remember him at Bournemouth was he was like, he managed kind of one of the smaller clubs, and his teams were known for playing football. They didn't just kind of sit back and just kind of pack in the box. They were actually they gave big teams a go. And he's always played attacking, really good football on the eye. But his issue at Bournemouth and the reason why they got relegated was because they let in so many goals that season. And a lot of that was down to injuries as well. And so to see completely a complete flip on that is wild. And so that's definitely credit to them. You mentioned the transfers, and they have spent a lot of money, but at the same time they haven't missed. I don't think they've missed on a single player.
Yeah,
The defender they brought in, Sven Botman, I don't think he's lost a game
yeah,
since he's been in the squad.
he's great.
Um,
Yeah, Trippier has been amazing too.
mhm. And so that's pretty fair. Uh, I did, again, kind of outside the box thing. I went with Marco Silva, just because the way he has Fulham playing, it's not it's a promoted side, and they don't. It doesn't feel like this is a promoted side.
Yeah,
They lost to Spurs yesterday, but I thought they were better than Spurs. To be honest, I thought they
yeah,
played a pretty good
yeah.
game.
They really
Um,
did.
they I thought they were unlucky not to at least get a point from Newcastle the week before. Like his big striker Mitrovic missed a PK, like did a weird thing on a PK. He
Yeah,
like
he hit double hit it weirdly. He
yeah.
hit it twice. Yeah,
So just the way he has Fulham kind of playing, and then you look at the kind of the roster makeup. It's not necessarily names that pop out.
yeah.
And what's weird is he also had his stint in the EPL before with Everton, and it didn't necessarily go too well. So yeah, he's definitely deserving of some praise. And
Yeah,
I really
definitely.
think De Zerbi's maybe maybe it's too early now. The way he has Brighton playing it's different than Potter. The way that they're scoring is insane, and it's possible by this time at the end of the season, we'll finally see where Brighton are at the end of the table. If they get top four, I think he should deserve it, because Brighton aren't that
Yeah,
far away, and just
yeah,
I used to think they had an issue with when it came to striker, or they were too reliant on Trossard. Trossard's now not in the team, and they found this Evan Ferguson guy just kind of pick and place from the bench, and he's flying for them. So yeah. So who's your biggest surprise team so far?
Well, yeah, I'm gonna steal Jeremy's too, but it's definitely Fulham. But at the beginning of the year, I was super worried about Brentford.
I think it's a good answer.
Because yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna go with Brentford because they lost Ericsson and they've done really well with Ericsson after like a little bump, like a bumpy month or whatever, and what was it in like February probably, and then they got Ericsson and boom, they never looked back. So I thought losing him was gonna be big, and it's kind of like the second year syndrome here in the Premier League. Like some of these teams sometimes they already had a debut year in the Premier League, and the second year is when they get relegated. So I was really worried about Brentford, and the fact that they're in eighth place, they're either beating or drawing the big guys. It's awesome. So really wasn't. I wasn't necessarily expecting them to be in a relegation fight, but I definitely thought they'd be, at the bottom part of the table, maybe like 13th, 12th, something like that. So,
Hmm.
yeah, it's Brentford and also Fulham, obviously. I'm glad that you mentioned Marcos Silva because he's done a great job, and Mitrovic is hitting on all cylinders usually. And they almost did pull out the win against Tottenham. I mean, it was just a Harry Kane PK was all that separated, the points there from a draw. So yeah, both as Fulham and Brentford for me.
So I went with Newcastle, but we've already kind of spoken about them. So I'll kind of be cheeky and say Man United. Just because
Ooh.
the team that we saw that played Brentford early in the season, that team is no more, and it's not just Casemiro kind of coming in. So I mean, the job that Ten Hag has done, just kind of seeing Rashford back to his old self, back to I guess where he was a couple seasons ago. I mean, Rashford is absolutely flying for them. It
Mhm.
just feels maybe they kind of hit a rough patch, and maybe this kind of backfires again. But at least at the moment, I was never looking at Man United as a top four threat, to be honest. And they're still kind of at least stats wise suggest that they are overperforming a little bit, especially with goals. And it'll be interesting to see how Wout Weghorst works with them. But
Yeah.
it's hard to deny what they've been able to do so far. And at least when they play from the back, now De Gea still has some issues every now and then.
Yeah.
They were able to create spaces and scoring chances from playing from the back in a way that they didn't used to do. I think you didn't necessarily see that in this past game, but you really saw that in the games leading up to this, especially for City. City I thought were going to just absolutely terrorize them when it came to just getting them to turn the ball over, and that didn't happen.
Right.
And they're still the roster makeup is still kind of weird. The way he's trying to sometimes fit Bruno on the white wing. Sometimes Bruno and Ericsson together, it's a little too attack minded. You saw what happens when they miss Casemiro, and
Mhm.
the right back with Wan-Bissaka is still kind of a bit of an experiment, but it feels like they're close I want to say necessarily returning, but they're close to being something a little bit different than the way I've seen them recently. So, and that is credit
Yeah.
to Ten Hag because I don't think he joined you mentioned of a stable club at with Chelsea. I didn't think their situation was that stable when he joined,
Yeah.
and he's turning
Yeah.
that around
True.
really quickly.
Mhm.
Who was your biggest disappointing team so far?
Well, it was going to be Nottingham Forest, but they've seemed to put a pretty good string of results together, and they're up to 13th now. But it was going to be them because they're in the relegation zone and have 20 players. But now I'm gonna go with Chelsea, 10th place, all that money spent, and just changing coaches all the time, and they're never settled, and the squad kind of is playing like that. Injuries too, obviously, but yeah, I mean, just all the money that they spend. They're a big club, and to be sitting in 10th place, like we said, behind some teams like Brentford, Fulham, and Brighton. Yeah, it's really disappointing. It'll be curious. I'll be curious to see where they actually finish up, especially with all these January transfers. But it's got to be Chelsea for me.
Yeah, I figure we can kind of just kind of pick one of the two, because I think the other one is Liverpool. It's weird because going into the season, we'll get to we'll do a deeper dive with both these teams later on. But going into the season, I thought it was quite a glaring weakness to not adjust the midfield was going to be an issue. And they've had injuries. They've had injuries to Thiago to start the season. Naby Keita wasn't able to play like the first half of the season. You relied on Henderson and Milner, so obviously that didn't work out. And then the injuries to Diaz and Jota really have just completely changed how Klopp likes to attack, at least on that side. And it's very reliant on Salah's netting for them. And I think Salah's kind of been overplayed as well. And the other point has been because the midfield can't necessarily do what they've been asked to do in the past. Fabinho's kind of suffering from that. And you're seeing teams kind of play through the midfield and get a lot more chances than they used to. And Alice, when I looked at the stats for goalkeeping, um, Allison is number three when total saves, and Raya was number
Yeah,
one. I think
yeah.
Fulham's Leno was number two, and then Leeds Melier was like fourth in saves. Ederson was like first with like he had to make like 20, 28 saves like throughout the whole season. Allison was in the 60s. And so teams are getting way more looks than they used to, and you're letting in more goals than in the past, and you have injuries at the back as well now. Virgil's out. Um, you know, uh, Gomez or Matip has been kind of hit and miss. Gomez, I don't really think is a center back, and so the squad makeup has been poor, and I think you're just kind of seeing a hangover from last season. And it would be fine if they had won the quad, and they were only a couple games from kind of doing that, and maybe this would all be easier to stomach. And it just feels like it's one of those things where I'm worried that if they only do get that one Champions League and that one title with Klopp, with Salah in his prime, with Virgil van Dijk in his prime, Allison, I do think that'll be a little disappointing, and you're starting to kind of worry a little bit about that because if they don't get Champions League, they rely a lot of the revenue from Champions League. You don't really make player sales anyways. The whole thing, the way how they bring in transfers is they do player sales. All their teams have aged into their 30s,
Mm.
almost overnight, and there's not really many players to sell to do a rebuild, and I do think you need to do a rebuild. So yeah,
Yeah,
it is what it is.
yeah, definitely.
What's been your favorite game so far?
So I'm gonna be a homer and go with the two Arsenal Tottenham games
I'll
because
accept it.
Arsenal the first time won 3-1 and then what was it last week won 2-0. So yeah, I'm gonna go with those games. But I mean, like from neutral standpoint, I think the ones you picked are honestly the best games of well. Arsenal Man U was really good too. Add
I
that
think
in there,
that's
but
fair. Yeah,
the
I
ones
will.
you picked are probably the most entertaining
I'll
of the
accept
year
that.
so far, by far.
Oh, I saw when I asked this, Jeremy got it, but his one too. I was like, oh, you guys are just picking the ones you guys enjoyed because Jeremy picked Brentford
Yes,
3, Liverpool 1.
they're
I can understand him enjoying that game. That was not one of my favorite games. I'll
yeah,
put it that way. Yeah, I went with Newcastle Man City 3-3. I just remember kind of talking about that. I think I mentioned like the FIFA. I think I said FIFA like 3 or 4 times and like a reference. It was video game like. It was one of the first times where I thought maybe Man City can be vulnerable, and maybe Newcastle are more different than we think. And I think that's kind of panned out in both instances. And then yeah, I did put two. I didn't want this to kind of go on the wayside because it's not a game between two of the big boys. We're not a Super League podcast. I do think it's worth remembering how good that Leeds Bournemouth game was. Just end to end entertainment. It was some bad defending in that as well, but just as this is supposed to be kind of a an entertaining product essentially. And this was great entertainment, and at that point it might have even saved Marsh's job.
yeah,
Yeah, I kind of just went with that. I mean, a game with 7 goals, a
yeah,
couple belters. I think Leeds won at the very end with a goal, and so yeah, I just remember enjoying that game. So I just wanted to kind of remember that again.
oh yeah, that was a great game.
And so we're going to do a top 4 rundown. We'll try to get. So we don't have time to do every teams. I think there'll be 3 teams I didn't include, which is Leicester, Crystal Palace, and I think Villa. And the reason is Villa might actually. This was a couple of weeks ago when I did this. Villa might actually make me eat my words because I don't think those 3 teams are in a Europe spot or going to be relegated. Um,
Right,
but
they're just kind of in the middle. Yeah,
I think Emery is on pace to. I think he's maybe 5 wins in his first 7 games in charge. You could see Villa charge up the table, and at the same time, Leicester has not started 2023 off to a good start. They finally got a draw versus Brighton, a much needed draw, I would say. And then yeah, with Palace, Palace just seemed kind of a I want to say broke a unbalanced squad. It's hard to kind of judge Vieira this season. They lost Conor Gallagher. You lost kind of your pressing engine, and it just seems the team doesn't necessarily function the same way. Um, but I don't think they're in danger of going down. So yeah, we'll just kind
yeah,
of get that. So what we'll do is we'll do top 4. We'll do Europe contenders. I guess we'll do like the top 10, and then we'll do teams we're worried about. Our relegation contenders. But before we get started, I did want to make this point. I think you do see a bit of a theme with the top 4. And I do like the point that you mentioned at the end, so I'll let you bring that up as well. But I do think there's a distinct commonality with the top four, and it's they all have an exceptional, basically a defensive midfielder, but a cleanup guy. And that is playing well right now. So Thomas Partey, Rodri at Man City, Bruno Guimaraes at Newcastle, and then Casemiro. And Brighton's Casado and Fulham's Paulinho are good mentions as well. And you see both those teams, making a Europe push. And then I do like the one guy I kind of missed was Declan Rice. And you put that in there. I think that's a really good shout as well.
I mean, but he's more of a product of he's the one that's kind of keeping West Ham from the drop right now. More
Mhm.
like the rest of his team is more, letting him down than he's not playing well. But I don't know. Just Antonio's not scoring, Bowen's not scoring, but Declan Rice is there and cleaning up at least, and maybe he'll move to a bigger club as well.
And I mean, you look at. I mean, I mentioned it before. One of the biggest reasons for Liverpool's downfall, I do think, has been the regression of Fabinho. Fabinho can't kind of control the middle of the pitch by himself anymore. He can't
Mm.
cover that distance.
Yeah.
So he needs players next to him that can kind of do that. And just to use, it's not the most sexy position, even though it's in the middle of the field. But it's maybe the most important position that a lot of people just maybe sometimes it goes unnoticed. But
Mhm.
because you're not seeing the big assist numbers or the big goals, but these players, and when they're on form, they lead to wins. So I'd say they lead the 3 points. So
Yeah. Good shot.
we'll get started with the first one. So Arsenal in first place, 50 points. I did the last two games. So they played a little bit more than this. I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about like maybe the Newcastle draw or the Brighton win, or maybe even the Spurs win?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, we got the 0-0 draw against Newcastle was, it was a little frustrating,
Mhm.
but because you would expect some goals at least, but at least Arsenal they played well. Their passing was slick. They just didn't necessarily have their shooting boots, which was a pretty big issue at times last year, to be honest. But at least they looked good and played well at least. There were some moments where Newcastle threatened. Ramsdale was huge, and then the Brighton game. This was one. This was a weird one because Arsenal, jumped up to the huge lead and then started to concede again, and it was kind of like, is this going to be a capitulation? Are they done? Because it was 3-2 at one point after Arsenal were up 3-0.
Mhm.
So it was kind of like a team that switches off that's not a champion like team right there. You got to maintain your focus. So I was a little worried, and then thankfully Martinelli kind of stepped up in the 71st and kind of
With an
made it 3-1.
amazing ball by
Yeah,
Odegaard.
amazing ball. Oh, it was, and Odegaard's been great. And then that kind of killed it off a little bit. Ferguson ended up scoring. Your guy Evan. That's kind of what started this hot streak of his.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
scored
good
in
call.
I mean, it's Brighton's really good. I didn't expect Arsenal to score four on them, but it was a little bit of maybe a wake up call for the defense to be like, hey, you gotta stay on at all times, even if it's 3-0. Teams come back, in an instant. So there was a bit of a wake up call, but both the games are kind of different, and I think different mentalities kind of to deal with after each game, and they seem to have kind of done that. I thought maybe anytime they like draw, I feel like that could be a hiccup. They could start a losing streak, and they put that to bed with the Tottenham win after the draw against
Mhm.
Newcastle. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think they have a strong mentality. I think it's really early still, and I don't know. I'm just nervous about it, but yeah, I mean, I think mentally it looks like they have champions mentality. It just is everything else though, just injuries and I don't know, just things like that always worry me. But they're strengthening the team too, and yeah, they're good. I think they've got what it takes mentally. It's just can they stay healthy? Maybe some luck involved as well. We'll see.
And we'll I just wanted to kind of get those games out of the way, and then I'll talk to you. I'll let you talk a little bit about what happened yesterday with that big win over Man United. But You mentioned to touch on the Brighton game. One thing I thought that was interesting is Arteta did something kind of weird where he took off both fullbacks at the same time. So he took off John Zinchenko for Tierney. I think he took off Ben White for Tomiyasu. And I think that kind of maybe unsettled them a little bit. Mitoma was amazing in that second half. I think they got it to 4-3, and VAR kind of ruled back one of the goals.
Yes. Oh yeah, they did. Good call. Yeah.
And with Newcastle, I thought that was the first time where you guys really did miss Jesus. But
Mm.
that said, I do think maybe one of the best chances of the game. There weren't many chances between either. It seemed like Eddie Howe went there to basically get a point and to just not concede because they weren't even trying to play that day. They were also taking a lot of time off the. Anytime there was like a foul or anything, they tried to kill the game.
Oh
It was
yeah.
it was really really annoying.
Shithousery.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
really was.
Yeah, it was. It was.
It
Or
reminded
like, not faking injury necessarily, but taking an extra
just
long
taking
time after like,
forever. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I
Uh,
did not like that at all.
And so, you thought maybe there was a chance for that to kind of unsettle you, and it didn't really happen. One thing I actually ended up putting there is you didn't get there. We're going to win the league moment because it felt like there was everything building up for like this wig. Usually, when a team does kind of, or when a club like wins the league, you see fans kind of say that there's like one moment you can point to. I can say as a Liverpool fan, it happened versus Man United when Allison basically did an assist to Salah. I don't. It might have been at United or might have been at Liverpool, but it was sometime in January or February where Salah scored, and I think that made it like a 2-0 game. And at that point, it just felt like it's going to happen, and that's when the fans kind of sung that. And I do think you guys actually got that in the last game. Um, but the game the 2-win over Spurs was interesting as well because it was such a different first half to second half. And
Yeah,
one thing that was crazy is Ramsdale had to make 7 saves.
he
And so
did. Yeah.
even when maybe yeah, things aren't necessarily flying off as well as they should, you've got a really good keeper that you can point to. So
Yeah.
that's good as well.
Yeah, and he's been good with his feet, but I mean, he kind of I think he was kind of at fault for Man U's second goal on Sunday. The Martinez goal, he kind of like came out and flapped at it a
Hmm.
little bit, and that's his one knock I would say is that like on corners you can tell they're just going to crowd him out, and he struggles to kind of come out and either get a fist to the ball or catch the ball with the opponent right on him. Like that's his one weakness. But shot stopping is top notch. He's good. He's good with the ball at his feet. And, he's got a lot of clean sheets and a good defense in front of him. So yeah, yeah, it's a good point. You got lines of midfielders, lines of defense to get through, and then you have to score on Rams too. So it's a good recipe for wins, I think.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, being good at your feet, I think maybe the biggest difference right now. Well, I shouldn't say that because the entire team is structured differently than Spurs. But there's such a difference in quality between Ramsdale and someone like Lloris. It's great. It's weird to say that because Lloris is he captains France and he's been in won a final, been in a final for them. But he has such a mistake in him. But the two goals
Yeah,
that Arsenal scored versus them, one he makes a mistake on the soccer goal, but two
it's terrible.
the one that Odegaard scored is from distance, and this is the one where Party has the assist that I mentioned. It starts with basically it's either a goal kick or Luis just has the ball at his feet, and he's so scared, he's so bad with his decision making or distribution that he just boots it away and gives the ball away. And that
Yeah.
happens a lot when you see Spurs play. And I think just eventually that's draining to be honest. So
hmm
yeah,
Yeah,
and so
he's a little more of an old school keeper where, probably at the beginning of his career was more focused on training, to focus on saves, not necessarily, with the ball
that's a
at
good way
his
to put
feet.
it.
But
Yeah.
he's also older, so maybe gosh, I hate to say it because he is a great keeper, but maybe he's just a little bit past his prime. Still really good, I would think. Like he could probably dominate in like the Bundesliga, but for the EPL, probably just a little bit past his prime. It hurts to say because he's such a pro, but yeah, probably past his prime.
To be honest, I'm surprised Spurs haven't tried to bring someone in. I think they've actually been linked to
Yeah.
Liverpool's backup in Kelleher. But
Huh.
that would be that'd be sad to see him go because I think that guy's really really good.
I think they've been
But
linked to
I don't.
Raya too.
He's not going to play over Allison, so it is what it is.
Yeah,
That would be
that's
interesting.
true.
Yeah. But
Yeah, I don't want
we'll
that to
get
happen.
to the 3-2 victory over United. Goals from Rashford. Rashford gets the first goal. Even Arsenal started this game really good,
Wonderful.
and it felt like this was completely against the run of play. Rashford actually kind of does one to get by Partey on this one, but then it, I think one of the main things you can kind of say is they didn't panic. I think they were losing to West Ham, late, a couple, I guess, a month ago, as well.
Mhm.
And no panic, no change in tactics or anything. And you get Nketiah to time a perfect run to beat Wan-Bissaka, and then Saka turns, has a FIFA goal of his own with a brilliant shot from distance. And then you mentioned the Martinelli or Martinez header from corner kick. Alex texted this a goal Jeremy would love because small guy winning the header, and then Nketiah kind of wins it for you at the end. But really, it's very clever play by Zinchenko and Trossard. But I think where it's kind of an issue for United is this is where maybe Casemiro, missing Casemiro showed up. Is
Yeah.
McTominay tries to dive to go for a ball and he misses it, so he's out of the play. And then another thing that happens is Fred was brought on for Anthony, so he Ten Hag took off one of his wide attacking players for a defensive midfielder, and Fred loses Odegaard. And so when the ball is crossed in, you see Fred is marking space, and Odegaard's able to kind of get some kind of touch, and that's the ball that goes to Martinelli. I mean, to Nketiah. But I mean, it was 25 shots for Arsenal. It felt like they were basically living in Man United's final third. I think Man United had 6 shots all game. Um,
Yeah.
and it was not competitive, to be honest, even though it almost ended 2-2.
Mm.
I mean, and we'll kind of touch on it, maybe not, but the way he started to play Zinchenko is masterful. It's almost positionless. When they play, it's like a 2-3-5 formation, and just Zinchenko's a midfielder. And it's they're able to do that because Martinelli is able to run backwards. Shaka, when he sees that there's space there, or Party, they all kind of know to recognize when someone leaves a space to kind of switch over. And
Mhm.
so that way you
Yeah.
never really cut up, but it's just it's
So
interesting how he
fluid.
plays. It is fluid's a good way to
Mhm.
put it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's you can tell they worked on it a ton, especially probably in the off season because it is just like it's perfect and it's so seamless, so quick.
I mean, it's just he's brought on to be a fullback. He can play fullback as well, but he really is a midfielder at heart. I think he had the most touches
Yeah.
in this game. It he hasn't even played that many games for you guys. I think he's only played like 12 or
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, he
But
got hurt.
he gives you guys such a dynamic than necessarily Tierney does, and it's been a
Yeah.
really good job to recruit him and bring him
Yeah,
over.
I think Tierney's a good option, a good backup. But with his injury problems, he's kind of forced to sit out, and then you bring in Zinchenko, and when he's healthy, he's just so good on the ball. He changes things. Tierney's awesome. I love him. But Zinchenko's just a better passer. Like you said, he can be a central midfielder, and Tierney really can. He's kind of limited to the wide spaces, but Zinchenko too, just like his personality, you can tell like when they conceded a goal, he was like rallying everyone. When they scored the game winner, and there was like a couple minutes left, he was like getting everyone together and telling them to be smart and it's not over yet. Let's close it out. So locker room presence too as well, which I knew. Arteta knew him at City, so Arteta knew he's getting that
Yep.
as well. So it's been brilliant.
Yeah, it's just the way it just everyone on that team, it feels, is technical and good with the ball at their feet, and so it's hard to press them.
Hmm.
And I don't know. We'll kind of get to the key stats. So the goal scorer, they're at 45. I think they're second in the league, and conceded, they're at 16, and also second. The top goal scorer is maybe kind of the one issue you'd look at, because usually when a team wins the league, you have someone that's at least in the Golden Boot race. And right now, I think
Yeah.
Odegaard is leading with 8 goals, and then Martinelli on 7, Saka's on 7, and Nketiah is on 4. So you're seeing it's not like you guys are struggling for goals. It's just kind of
Yeah.
coming as a unit, and maybe that's kind of fitting because the way Arsenal
Yeah.
play is as a unit.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's a good thing because especially too if we were just relying on like Holland, kind of like one guy,
Hmm.
and he got hurt, then what are you gonna do? But you got multiple options at least, and as long as everyone's chipping in the goals, it doesn't matter if your main striker's out.
And so for players of the season, yeah, I did put Partey and Shaka, but really, the thing I said, like you guys play as a unit. It's one of those things where, like, if you miss Partey, I think you would struggle. If you miss Shaka, you'd maybe struggle. If you miss Saliba, or you would struggle. I think when you guys were missing Zinchenko, you struggled because everyone offers something different, and the way you guys play, the fluidness of it. I think there would be maybe an issue. Like you have maybe Fiera that can come on for Odegaard, but Fiera plays differently from Odegaard. Just the team is very structured to kind of um, eh, make everyone else, I guess, shine essentially.
Mhm.
So that's maybe a positive and maybe a negative. I don't know how you guys would do with injuries, but there's no reason to
Yeah.
kind of be negative right now because the way the squad is made up right now, they are as fun to watch as any team in Europe. So it's not just that they're winning games; they're good on the eye. Jeremy said so many times to me that he would love Arsenal to win because he's tired of watching City ball. He thinks he's tired of the way that Pep plays. The way that Liverpool plays, it's almost pragmatic and just it's safe. It's just not it's not entertaining. It's not good on the eye. The way
Uh,
Arsenal play, just the type of passing they're able to do, it's different. And
yeah.
to me, it's rewarding that they're getting wins with this as well with their play. So I think that's worth
Mhm.
saying.
Yeah, yeah, it's good. That's what was kind of frustrating about the Newcastle not scoring was just like they had all that slick passing, quick passing, but they just couldn't score. And honestly, sometimes that's going to happen, especially with Newcastle doing the things they're doing. So yeah, yeah, they're fun to watch. And I mean, Jeremy texted me that too. By the way, yeah, I was pretty happy. I was like, thank you. Good to have some. We'll take it. I mean, I still think it's going to be tight. I still feel like City just I think City have better players top to bottom possibly, but and they still have to play. So like
Yep.
you said earlier, two wins is 6 points. I know like
There's a game.
Arsenal have a game in hand
There's a
right now,
game in
but
hand,
that
but
would
yeah.
be but
Uh,
that would do it for City right now.
I
They
agree.
would be in first. So I still get worried and a lot of games to play still, and I'm always worried about injuries as an Arsenal fan. Always.
And one thing I kind of wanted to maybe get your kind of thoughts on is it is kind of funny how different. Like, um, I felt like maybe they had the league maybe even won after that City Spurs game, and then this kind of happens. I mean, how have your emotions kind of been in the last couple of weeks? Because it's at least kind of listening to how Andrew's spoken about it. I think he's kind of like you. He's a little bit more pessimist still. But
Yeah.
another thing that's kind of funny is this is all happening while our Spurs are kind of having a little bit of a downturn themselves,
Hmm.
and it was only it wasn't even a year ago. It was only I guess last April or whatever when Spurs got
Hmm.
that big game over Arsenal to get that top four, and it's just funny
Yep.
how things kind of flipped since then.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was Arsenal. It looked like they were locked in the top four, and had the struggles at the end to miss out, and we did wonder how that would affect them financially, especially, but also like mentally. And it looks like they've kind of put all that behind them. They're still in Europa League, but ambitions are higher than that,
Mhm.
and even higher than just getting top four at this point. So yeah, I'm really happy, but I'm like Andrew. I'm pessimistic. It's still early. Injury history at Arsenal too. Like just it's like ingrained in me now because they always had injuries. So it's always something that worries me. But they're beefing up the squad with Trossard and Kievor. I don't know how much they'll play if there's not injuries. Trossard will play a lot, but I don't know about Kievor. But yeah. I mean, it's good, and they're going to have to reinforce the squad again this summer too if they get in the Champions League because that's just going to be even more taxing than Europa because of the quality of the
Definitely.
opposition in that, obviously. But yeah, it's fun times. It's been a great year, but yeah, really nervous still, and just I don't know when I don't know like how many games there would have to be left for me to finally exhale and be like, I think we got it wrapped up. It'd
Well,
probably be like
I'll
one game, but
I'll get to February. Also, I'll kind of get to you kind of again leading me to something I want to get to later on because there was a stretch in not in February. There was a stretch in April where that would if I was a fan of that club, that would make me kind of hold my breath. But we'll get to that
I
later.
feel you.
One thing I do want to say is speaking of Pep and Arteta, it is interesting how you can see some of the things that he learned when he was at City, but you can also see a difference, and it's just the way that he allows his wide players to play with freedom. It's a way that you don't see with Pep anymore, and I think
Mhm.
in many ways that's kind of been Pep's kind of downside. We kind of talked about that, but I do want to get this out there too. Arteta's story is interesting because Arsenal have been patient with him, and despite a lot of criticism, because and I guess they just believed in him once they hired him. But they hired a very young. I think he was the youngest manager at the time, and he was an inexperienced manager. And
Mhm.
it wasn't necessarily pretty days in the beginning. I think they had 2 years in a row where they finished like eighth. I remember they had a really bad start to a season where I remember thinking, "Well, this is worse than how you guys were doing with Unai Emery."
Yeah.
I think I asked
Yeah.
you. I think I even asked you that in an old podcast.
Mhm.
And it's one of those things where it feels like just Arteta kind of winning that FA Cup early on was able to kind of buy a little time maybe others wouldn't have gotten. But another thing that's kind of
Yeah.
wild is I don't know if you remember this or not. You probably do, but maybe people listening don't remember this. Is when Arsenal started playing, or when Arteta started playing, it was almost mostly a back three. And it was very, very boring. They were hard to
Mhm.
kind of score against, but it was not pleasing on the eye at all. And it's just
Yeah.
to me, it's entertaining, and it's good to see how someone has transitioned from that kind of style to playing a style that I spent a couple minutes kind of raving about. Just so
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I think he was just trying to get results with the players that he had, and I think I'm hoping the board also kind of like knew that, and they're like, all right, let's give him a couple transfer windows, not necessarily like results. We'll give him some windows first, and then obviously he's gotten the players that he wants for his system, and he continues to get those players. For the most part, I mean, I know they wanted like Mudrick, but they can't afford that much. I was fine with getting Trossard instead for like a lot less. But yeah, they have been patient, and it's nice to see, especially with like we mentioned, Chelsea firing a bunch of managers, even in just one season, and that's kind of like the trend for a lot of these clubs. Is just a couple bad results and you're done. So it's nice to see
hmm
a club have faith and loyalty kind of in a manager. We'll see, we'll see how far that goes. Like if there ever is a bad season for Arteta or whatever. But yeah, it was nice to see, and they're getting the rewards for staying patient with them.
and they're also the people I guess behind Arteta. I think someone to do is his name to do.
You do,
He's
yeah,
been nailing transfers and nailing profiles.
yeah,
I think you guys got Martinelli from the the Brazilian league.
yeah,
And I just think what's interesting is you've got a team that's fluid, that's full of technical quality everywhere. But it also doesn't lack aggression. You guys don't necessarily lose duels, and you don't lack energy or pace in the side. And I just think it is different than the way City play. And yeah, it's worth saying again. It's I think for just in neutral in general, I think that's good to see. It's good to see the game go that way, and it's good to see it rewarded.
yeah. Just to break up like the kind of city monopoly that was going on or is going on.
Yeah, and I mean Eddie Nketiah is off to a fantastic start. I think it's 4 goals since the Jesus injury, and it's good that they've been able to kind of keep him happy, keep him hungry, and not necessarily sometimes you just put guys on loan. Now they did that with Balogun, but the way that they've handled Eddie Nketiah throughout all this has been really good too. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah, and
possible it's possible
we'll
they
see what happens.
it's possible they knew what they had in him, and that's the reason maybe they let go of Aubameyang as well. They kept seeing
Yeah,
him in training.
maybe.
Yeah, so
Yeah, and he always tended to do well, like in the cup games. I think he scored like a hat trick last year, maybe in a cup, and then he kind of was the main man at the end there in that stretch, and he provided goals there too. So yeah, it's good to see him play, but I do wonder like yeah, eventually with Jesus, we'll start over him, and I just wonder if he can be the main man somewhere else. I think that this stretch has proven that.
mhm.
So there will be probably a day where he will want to go somewhere else and be the main man. But for now, it's great to have a backup like striker here that is scoring goals, and it's just gonna make the team stronger too when Jesus comes back, and you don't have to you don't have to hurry Jesus into the team. You can kind of take your time with it, which, like you said, with some some Liverpool players, And some Arsenal players in the past, they don't do that. They kind of just throw them back in, and a lot of times the injury comes back or it gets worse. We kind of saw Partey last year with that, so
Yeah.
that'll be huge just to be able to kind of integrate him in slowly, make sure he gets like 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there until he's built back up, and in the meantime, you're not missing any goals. With Nketiah, it's great.
And with the Trossard, I mean, Trossard can play in the middle as well. He can also play wing back if you need. He showed that a little bit at Brighton. So Trossard does allow you to maybe kind of shuffle the squad or rotate the squad a little bit. We might actually see him start versus. I think they play Man City coming up in the FA Cup game. So they
Yeah.
haven't played him in the league. They're about to play him in the FA Cup as well.
Mm,
Um, and you have Smith Rowe as well. Reece
yeah.
Nelson. I think he's maybe coming back from injury, but we saw him versus Chelsea. Fabio Vieira has looked really good in a couple of the FA Cup runs. I think he had 2 goals versus Oxford.
Mm,
And so you maybe do have a squad to kind of rotate and still kind of save energy that way, which is big because that Europa travel is going to affect you guys as long as you stay um, in that competition. And really,
yeah.
the stretch, the Europa stretch when it comes back, and the April schedule is going to be what tests you guys because it's Man City, Chelsea, Newcastle, and Brighton in a row. And
Mm,
so if you guys can do
yeah.
that, it'll be you guys will have the league. But that's not easy. And I think Liverpool are somewhere in March. So I shouldn't really include Liverpool these days because it doesn't seem like that's not necessarily a fair fight, but that is Arsenal. What do you, anything else you want to add before we move to City?
No, no, I think we got it pretty good. I mean, I'm looking at the schedule and there's this early like little bump too, where it's the FA Cup, but yeah, they play City and then they got Everton, which you would think would be an easy one, but then they play Brentford and City in back to back. We like 4 days in
Yeah, they
between
play
that.
City really.
Uh,
Yeah, like
yeah, so
close
that's
together.
gonna be tough. Yeah, it's gonna be really tough. I don't know why. It's just a mental thing. I still don't think Arsenal can beat City. I guess it's a mental thing because how good City's been recently, and they do have like last year they had our number. So I don't know. We'll see, but it's exciting times for Arsenal fans for sure. We haven't been in this position in a long time.
Well, I think speaking of last year, when you saying the number, I think I can't remember. Well, the first time I think they lost like 6-1. There was a red card. There was a red card I think in both games. But that January, I think it was New Year's Day a year ago when Arsenal played Man City. That was when the first time I think like Thomas Partey like got his first start in a while. That was when the first time you saw this team can be equal with Man City. I think they were even winning at one point, and then Odegaard or someone, I think it was Shaka. Shaka had like a lame red
I
card.
think it's shocking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it was just it was what it was, and that's kind of unfortunate because had
Mhm.
Arsenal been able to beat Man City that day, Liverpool win the league. So
Ah,
I'll blame you guys.
interesting.
But we'll move on. We'll move on to Man City. They are. It is only a 5 point gap, and Man City has done this to Liverpool. I think in 18 or what in 18-19. It might have been 17-18. When Man City were able to make up a 5 point gap on Liverpool, it might have been 6. So it is fair to worry about them. But 45 points on 20 games played. Um, I wouldn't necessarily go through all of these, but I'd say the last few games, it's more like the last 5 games. They did draw 1-1 to Everton. They beat Chelsea. They kind of destroyed Chelsea a little bit, and they beat Chelsea in the league. It was only 1-1, 1-0 win. But then they kind of smashed them 3-0 in the cup, FA Cup. But it was kind of a mirage that game because it was like a free kick goal. There was a PK. Yeah, so it was one of those things where are City back or are they not? Then they lost to Southampton, so that kind of answered those questions. A team that they destroyed 4-0 in October, and that was kind of interesting. And then they lost to Man United, so two losses, two in a row. It felt like they were maybe going to lose 3 in a row because they were losing
Yeah.
2-0 to Spurs, and then just an absolute wild second half from Mahrez, Alvarez, and Holland. I do want to touch a little bit on the Spurs game because I think I even tweeted about this. It felt like in that second half, Riyad Mahrez just completely ignored everything that Pep has told him for the
Mm.
last season because he was taking players on. It was almost anti Pep ball. He was having freedom again, and that freedom really. Perisic didn't want to defend him, and neither did Ben Davies. And basically, Mahrez kind of running at people, open things up, and that's the reason why they scored 4 goals in that second half.
Yeah, yeah. Perisic didn't do anything.
And I think it was a stark contrast from Grealish's play in that respect. So Pep doesn't seem to like wingers that like doing that, and I think because you can lose the ball and maybe you have transition moments that way, but at the same time, and sometimes you do need that. You need to beat a blocker to unsettle a settled line. You need to have someone that can beat a player 1v1. And right
Hmm.
now, City don't necessarily have that. They have Holland to kind of aim across to, and that's kind of it. And
Yeah.
then they were able to beat Wolves because that's basically what happened. De Bruyne was able to get a cross, and Holland was able to head, and then Wolves decided to just kind of give City the win with a lane PK, and then the keeper basically passed the ball to City, where they were able to get a tap in for Holland.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah. That's a bad one.
so they're on 53 goals scored. They're on pace for. I think they're on a pace to maybe break a record there. And they've conceded 20 goals, so they're third there. And then you mentioned Holland on 25, but Foden's on 7. So it very is Holland centric. And then
Yeah.
the players of the season, I do think it's Holland and Rodri. But maybe some late ads is they look a different team when Mahrez is. Well, Mahrez has kind of put himself in there with his play lately. But they look a
Hmm.
different team when Stones isn't playing, which is interesting. And it,
Yeah, yeah. I would
it,
agree with that.
they've had Pep's just had so many weird lineups. He started to play this youngster,
Lewis.
Lewis, Rico Lewis, kind of in there instead. He's almost playing him like Zinchenko, which is kind of wild.
Hmm.
So you don't know if he's playing fullback or if he's playing in midfield. He's kind of playing next to Rodri in some of these.
Yeah.
Um, he's playing like Ake at left back. He's not really playing Cancelo. When he played Cancelo, he played him at like right wing, which was weird. He did that versus Southampton, which made no sense.
Yeah.
It just feels Pep has kind of gone a little crazy with the lineups, and I think that's to your benefit as an Arsenal fan, but maybe not because once if he does get the lineup right and he does finally get some consistency again, you could see City cook again. So
Yeah. Yeah. I
there's
feel the same way.
yeah.
Yeah, 100%. It feels like they're just like a matter of time. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. But a lot of pieces that he can like fiddle around with too, because they're not as stacked as like depth wise as they were maybe like last year, but they're still pretty good depth there.
I mean, do you want to talk about the Man United game because Grealish did score, and Grealish did help kind of score with the I think the first goal for Alvarez. He
Mhm.
like attacks the keeper and Luis kind of spills it, and that they're able to kind of get the tap in that way. I almost
Yeah.
feel like he's misprofiled. He's almost like a second striker because he doesn't really have the pace to be a winger. So he makes good runs in the box, and I think he is 6 feet tall. It
Mhm.
is kind of interesting. He does dwell in the box, but it's just when he's being asked to kind of to kind of cut in and be kind of like a narrow inverted winger, it just doesn't work. But
Yeah. Weird.
the reason why they lose this game is because the ref did something weird where he called offsides, and then they decided no, Rashford it wasn't really interfering with the play. Um, I've actually reversed myself on this. I used to think it was fine. Now I don't. And
Hmm.
it is interesting how that was allowed to stand. And then at the end, Rashford was able to get the second with a really good Garnacho assist. But the Bruno
Yeah.
the Bruno goal really did change everything. And yeah, it maybe shouldn't have counted.
Yeah, I mean that was a tough one. Really kind of like confusing, and people saying, "Well, the law, like the letter of the law, says it's offsides," but and players, former players, and pundits were like, "Well, yeah, that's all fine and good, but as a player, you think it's throwing you off the offsides guy because you're thinking he's going to get a touch of it." So yeah, that was an interesting one. Yeah, who knows?
I mean,
I don't
it
know.
was
It's just
absolutely clever by Bruno, and for Rashford to actually leave it, I guess is
yeah,
worthy of saying that. But it
it was
is
very smart.
it is kind of interesting how you don't see teams kind of do this more often because it's maybe hard to kind of plan this. But I remember it was in the FA Cup versus Chelsea where it was either Pulisic or Mount, but one of them was hilariously offsides, and Virgil van Dijk was like basically like pointing and laughing, and because basically, and what happened was that player basically stopped running and allowed the trailing guy, Mount or Pulisic, to basically run onto the ball, and they crossed it in, and it was almost a goal. And it's just it is funny how that can kind of fool you. But the reason why I don't think that should have counted is Kyle Walker was basically right there running with Bruno, and I think he thinks Rashford's going to get to it, so he worries about Rashford more than Bruno. I think if it's just Bruno, Kyle Walker takes him out. But
Yeah,
anyways,
yeah, I would agree.
yeah.
But the two of them, yeah, definitely, definitely.
And so that is a gap to make up. It is kind of crazy and bonkers that Pep gave away three of his best creative players to rival clubs. He didn't just give away Sterling to Sterling I guess isn't really doing much at Chelsea, but it is crazy. He gave Jesus and Zinchenko to a team in the EPL, let alone Arsenal. And you're seeing that maybe backfire a little bit. He's playing Nathan Ake almost every game now at left back. And I don't think Nathan Ake is a left back, but two, I don't really think he's a good center back either. But I think you're seeing them struggle with that as well. You don't have any kind of overlap or any kind of offensive output to help Jack Grealish on that side, and that's another thing too. The wing options they have is bad. To be fair, I mean
Yeah,
Cole Palmer, Jack Grealish, Mahrez has kind of helped out a little bit. You're not seeing Foden have fun. Julian Alvarez can
mhm,
play on the wing, but he's mostly a striker. Or it's like
yeah.
Bernardo Silva.
He's been good when he's on, but yeah, it doesn't make sense that like they got rid of Sterling, and I mean he hasn't necessarily hit the ground running at Chelsea, but he's kind of at times in games what they lacked is like you said, like unless it's Mara's doing it, they lack like that directness and just use your pace and be direct and take players on.
Because the only one making runs is Holland, and it's harder. It's harder to make a run. Holland obviously can't just make a run from the wing. Holland's going to want to make a run in the middle. It's harder to find balls that way. Because the keeper can kind of run
Mhm.
out. It's easier to do a ball over the top on the wing, and they don't have that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Pep just doesn't like playing that way. So yeah, it is weird. Um, and I mean, it was well documented that I think Man City had more players than anyone else playing in Qatar, so maybe that's kind of had a little effect. But at the same
yeah,
time,
could be.
they aren't that far off. So it will still maybe hear a little bit from City. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, I think so.
yeah, we'll move on to Newcastle at third and 39 points. I think they're tied with Man United on points, but maybe I don't know why Newcastle's third, but it is what it is. Um,
Mhm.
But one thing that's interesting to kind of touch on when you look at like their recent results, so they drew 0-0 to Leeds, they drew 0-0 to Arsenal. They lost in the FA Cup game to Sheffield Wednesday, where they played a lot of their starters. Then they smashed Leicester 2-0 in the cup game. They beat Fulham 1-0 with a goal from Isaac, kind of late in the game. I think it was in like the 90th minute, and Fulham should have it. You figure when you get a PK, someone converts it. So that game
Yeah,
probably should have been a draw as well. And then they drew 0-0 to Palace. So you're starting to. I mean, they're still. They don't concede. But you're not necessarily. You're seeing a little bit of the goals start to dry out a little bit.
yeah, a little bit. It's weird.
Yeah. I mean, goal scored. They're in fifth with 33, so that's not bad. I mean, the 11 goals is conceded is wild, and then their top scorer is Almiron
Yeah,
with 9. I don't think Almiron has hit since that game versus Leicester. So,
yeah, yeah. He had that hot streak, really hot streak, but seems to be cooling off.
yeah, I mean, for kind of positives, I just put like they're very well organized without the ball. It's yeah, I praised Arsenal kind of this way. To me, it's basically what Klopp ball used to be, where just everyone works hard without the ball, and if someone is out of position, the other player will like run back. So like if Almiron Almiron sees that Trippier has like lost the ball or whatever, Almiron will run back, and Almiron will be like the right back if that's needed.
Right.
Or like you see Sean Longstaff do that a lot. He covers gaps, and that's how you play with the 4-3-3. The midfielders kind of when the fullbacks go up, the midfielders kind of uh, you close off spaces or to take that position essentially. Um, a very very strong back line, and they've basically done that by investing into the squad. But like you said, they didn't buy a $100 million player. They just bought a lot of players for like 30 million, 40 million. And
Hmm.
that's worked out. Sven Botman especially,
Yeah,
and then
definitely.
honestly, possibly buy of the season. Now everyone's going to look at Holland, and that'll be a fair answer, but it might be Pope. So
Yeah,
to get
been
Pope
brilliant.
to get Pope and get him between the sticks, It is. It's surprising that no one else tried to get him. It's possible Spurs didn't try to go get for him
True.
because they bought him for like
Yeah.
$20 million, and it's not like he wasn't amazing with Burnley. It didn't make sense why other teams didn't try to go get him, and he's been a
Yeah.
fantastic buy for them as well.
Yeah, and Burnley's getting relegated, so clearly he wanted to be in the Premier League and is a Premier League player. So yeah, it just made it made it made sense at the time. It was a pretty good buy. I think. I mean, it's pretty expensive for a keeper, but I think if he wasn't at a team that was getting relegated, it probably would have been a lot more.
And I guess like some of the concerns to can maybe say is the goals have dried up a little bit. I don't really know how much what he how can necessarily do because when you look at the bench options, I think it was versus Arsenal where I was just like this is maybe where they kind of uh, they're behind still because to replace Callum Wilson or Saint Maxian, it was someone like Jacob Murphy coming on. If to replace Almiron, it was another kind of player you didn't really think about. They do finally have Ishak back. That'll maybe help. He can kind of play on the wing or play with Wilson. The goal that they scored versus Fulham, it was Wilson passing it to Ishak. So you can both of them can play together. Sometimes you see Joe Linton kind of play on the wing when St. Maximin's out. So I guess you have some cover that way. But at least in the Fulham game and in the Leeds game, maybe even in Arsenal as well, Sean Longstaff got into pretty good positions, and just he offers a lot of good energy. Covers I think he covers the most ground for them. He wins duels. He makes good forward runs and overlapping runs. But he gets the ball in the box and he just can't finish. And it feels
Yeah.
like having someone either he needs to work on that or having someone other than him in that position it would be more beneficial.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely.
And I mean, versus they created a number of chances versus Palace, a number of really good chances. But again, Joe Linton, St. Maximin, and Longstaff just kind of messed up in front of goal. And it is interesting how they have recently sent Chris Wood to Forest. So they like their forward options, and they're not scoring, and it's interesting to kind of see a forward go. But I don't know if they're trying to bring someone in or not. But it at least for now it does feel like they're on a bit of a slide when it comes to the output. But it's possible that can just be a bump, and they can get
Yeah.
this reversed.
Yeah,
Um,
and they have some other players that could possibly, when fully healthy, kind of break that goal scoring kind of drought, if you will. But still getting like not losing,
hmm,
maybe some draws, but
if you
still getting results.
you
So
keep a
yeah,
clean
we'll
sheet,
see.
you're gonna be
Yeah,
in any game you play, and it feels
and
like
they keep
they
a bunch of clean
they
sheets.
they really do. And we'll move on to Man United. Also 39 points. Um, I think for some reason I have them in fourth. It feels like it's kind of the same spot. Um,
Yeah, it's coming.
for again, I still have like the last two games played, but so they beat Wolves 1-0 with Rashford being the hero. It was kind of interesting how he was only subbed on at halftime. I don't know if you kind of remember that, Rex. He like missed a
Yeah,
team meeting or something.
yeah, I missed a
Um,
team meeting yet,
but
or
it, but
was late for it.
but it's worked out because that possibly could have backfired on Ten Hag because he almost did the same thing. He tried to treat Rashford almost like Ronaldo. Rashford had the character to not take a slight of that, and Rashford since then has been buzzing for them. They were able to beat Bournemouth 3-0. Casemiro kind of helped with kind of lead the way there. Then they beat Man City, and then the interesting thing was they drew Crystal Palace 1-0 after scoring the first goal, and they only drew because Michel Elise had an amazing free kick goal to really
Yeah,
get
it
a
was.
point. But the thing that was interesting here was um, Ten Hag played Casemiro on four yellow cards, and Casemiro got a late yellow by kind of getting fooled by it was Zaha or Eze, and yeah, that's the reason why they had to miss the Arsenal game.
Huge mess. Yeah,
And I kind of we touched a little bit about the Arsenal game, but one thing I did want to put up here is I thought it was interesting how versus Man City, Ten Hag was brave with the subs. So what he did was he brought on Alejandro Garnacho and then kind of moved Rashford a little bit more into striker. And I think that's the reason why they ended up actually beating Man City, is because Garnacho offered a little bit more of an outlet where it kind of made Man City kind of worry about that a little bit more, and Garnacho got the assist. I think he could have done that in this game as well, and it was interesting to see him bring on Fred instead. Fred actually ended
Sure.
up kind of screwing up, for the third goal, in my opinion. But two is, it felt like Arsenal was having seven or eight, nine guys in the Man United box, because
Yeah.
Man United didn't have an outlet other than Rashford. Wanghorst isn't going to make that kind of run forward, and it felt like Arsenal were comfortable. Like even Rashford was like coming back to defend a little bit more. You didn't have a way to push Arsenal back, and Garnacho would have done that. So I think that
Yeah.
was a
I
mistake not to
completely
play him.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the whole game, even before the game, looking at the bench, I was thinking like, if they need a goal, if they need a spark, I think Garnacho's the guy on the bench that would do that. And yeah, to not see him play was kind of bizarre. But I think we both think Ten Hag's done a great job, and
Hmm.
yeah, Rashford's starting to heat up. He's got 9 goals. He's moving up the goal scoring golden boot charts. And that thunderbolt strike against Arsenal is unstoppable. So yeah, it's good to see him back. I'm a huge fan of him. Everything he's done like off the pitch too. So I'm glad he's back.
Yeah. And goal scored, they're at 32 goals. But what's interesting is they're in seventh for goals scored. And the xG I think was about like the xG actually was, did that say 20? No, that's not right. I think they're actually underperforming their xG. So what's interesting is it's possible, some of this could kind of revert, or not. But I think Spurs are closer to like 38 goals. So it just feels like they haven't necessarily scored enough. And they've conceded 25. So that puts them at fifth. For players of the season, I did put Kashmir and Rashford. Uh, what's interesting is I don't have Ericsson anymore. And I feel like in the beginning I would have put Ericsson, but Ericsson helps out a little bit here and there. Definitely helps out with build up and possession. But it does feel like those are the two kind of standouts at the minute for them.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And I mean, what do you think of them getting Wout Weghorst? And what do you think of his debut versus Arsenal, or his game versus Arsenal?
I mean, he was kind of anonymous at times, but looking at him, he's huge. He's a tall striker.
Hmm.
I don't know because again, kind of like his experience in the Premier League with Burnley was not good last year,
Hmm.
and they got relegated. But he is a goal scorer in Germany, so I don't know. But I think what he is kind of a stopgap until I think until they can get Kane in the summer, Harry Kane.
There you go.
So I think
Oh.
they just kind of, yeah, I think they kind of just wanted a guy to fill in for now, especially with Martial being hurt, and a tall kind of target guy. So if Martial, when he's back, then kind of it's 0-0. Let's bring on Vaghorst, who's huge and can be an aerial threat. So I think it's a good buy for now, with the idea that they're going to go for Kane in the summer. They needed someone, and I think it was kind of better to get a really tall aerial guy too, so they can kind of mix things up when they're fully strength at striker with Martial back.
That is I like that. That is cheeky. Man, I've always kind of figured eventually he would live, end
Mhm.
up somewhere in Manchester.
Try to win it.
It was
Yeah,
always
try
going
to
to
win some
be
trophies or something.
whether red or blue. That
Hmm.
is he would immediately fit in the squad as well. That I like that. That's pretty cheeky. Um,
Yeah, and Rashford on the
Rashford would
side.
like
That
him.
would
Yeah.
Bruno behind him. That'd be dangerous.
Yeah.
Casemiro too. Yeah, that'd be a good team.
And I mean, it's one of those things where it's interesting they didn't try to go for Felix. It feels like Felix maybe would have worked better here than Chelsea. But I mean, Wanghorst can kind of do that, like hold up and kind of not hold up, kind of play that deeper role as well, which is kind of weird because he is like 6'7". He's got pretty
Yeah,
good touch on him. I just think you need to Man United need to know how he plays. Versus Palace, they were just trying to like cross any ball they possibly could to him because he's like, oh, he's 6'7".
yeah,
He likes the ball to his feet. It's possible he helps them out. Obviously missing. He's not the same player as Martial.
yeah,
That's what we're saying. But I actually do think this could be clever. I thought he actually. I didn't think he played too bad. He. I don't think he was the issue for United in that Arsenal game. But to me it really is what's behind him. De Gea with his distribution still can be an issue. He makes amazing saves still. He's having another really good season with his saves. But the distribution isn't necessarily still there. And to be honest, the wing backs or the fullbacks are still a bit of a hit and miss. Dallow's been
Yeah,
injured, but
definitely.
Wan-Bissaka is very very hit and miss. And Malacia and Shaw, you don't necessarily know how long that's supposed to necessarily work out. And to me, Bruno and Ericsson together, it almost makes you too open in some cases. Now, he's tried to tried to do a way to fit Bruno at the right wing spot sometimes, and I think he actually did that in this game. He took off Anthony Bruno there and basically moved Fred into the defensive midfielder.
Yeah,
But you saw that really backfire because they didn't have any kind of way to keep the ball or to move it upfield. So it does feel like their squad is still a little imbalanced, a little bit to me. But at the same time,
yeah,
this is just his first year, and this is this is it's a good project for Den Hag
yeah.
to come in and work.
He's built. Yeah, he's building it. And I mean, if they can get top four this year too with that Champions League money,
Yeah,
then they really can go after Kane, and they'd be dangerous, and they'd have some more depth too at that point. So yeah, they're definitely moving up, and I like most of the things that Ten Hag has been doing. There's been some weird like subs, like we said earlier, but other than that, like he seems to have a firm grasp on the squad. And yeah, I think things are going well, and I think he's given some people, some fringe players, some chances too, and
yeah,
that always helps. So yeah, he's doing well, and I tip him and Man U for Champions League this year, and maybe possibly big things in the future. They might be coming back. Arsenal coming back. They're coming back. That might be like the new like rivalry again, and they provided some great games back in the '90s, 2000s. So I don't know. We'll see.
yeah. I was trying to think of how to actually like set that up because usually you don't always see those. 'Cause there was a lot of build up for this game.
Was yeah.
NBC was like had everyone in like Orlando, for it, and sometimes to kind of use Arsenal for an example. Sometimes you see build-ups like this, and games just completely fall flat with the Arsenal and
Yeah.
Newcastle game,
Yeah. Yep.
because
Yep.
it's such a big game. You have teams that are so worried about mistakes, and this was rock and roll. This was quite good, and I think one thing I wanted to kind of put out there was Pizzagate is alive and well. Pizzagate 2.0 or
Exactly. Yep.
3.0.
Yeah. It would be
For people
great.
that don't know that reference.
They have to watch one of our older shows. Go in the vault.
And so, yeah, I do agree with you. There's a lot of reason for optimism. The only kind of weird thing is the 32 goals. They're basically with Leicester and Brentford are for goals. And I think Fulham are 32, and Spurs are closer to 40 with 39. And it does seem, you mentioned Arsenal. I think are at like 40, 45. They're not scoring nearly as many goals as those teams. But
Right.
they can still kind of turn that around. And again, it's not the team that lost 4-0 to Brentford. So you've already seen
Yeah.
improvement there. Um,
Yeah. That's like distant memory now. Ooh.
yeah, there you go. And I mean, we'll go to the Europe contenders. We first have Spurs, so they're on 33 points. So fifth place. They lost Aston Villa 2-0. They beat Crystal Palace 4-0. But 4 goals were in the second half. We're going to get to that. There's a giant theme with Spurs lately. They lost 2-0 to Arsenal, but it was another check and the Hyde performance because
Yeah.
I honestly thought they were the better team in the second half versus Arsenal. And again, a lot of this was kind of their own doing with a bad error by Luis on Saka, and then even the Odegaard one. We mentioned with Luis kind of being with his distribution. But Ramsdale had to make more saves, and they went from 4 shots in the first half to having 13 shots in the second half. And what's kind of funny is they've been such a Jekyll and Hyde team between the first half and second half. The opposite happened versus Man City, where they were winning 2-0, and then they just completely decided to not play in the second half where Perisic and Ben Davies got abused. And then they played yesterday and were able to beat Fulham 1-0 with a goal by Harry Kane, and a game I did not think they deserved to win. But
No.
maybe that can be a thing that can kind of light them up because one thing to kind of say is this team is being completely led by Harry Kane because he's had 15 goals,
Yeah.
15 or 16 goals, and second on the team is Bittencourt with 4. You don't know where else they would be because you're not getting that production from Son this year. I
Hmm.
don't know if he had that eye issue. Maybe he's kind of battling
Yeah.
with that. Maybe he's trying
Yeah.
to
I
get
don't know.
get fit for South Korea for World Cup, and I just don't know what it is. But he looks different.
Yeah.
Um,
Was he have like 3 goals and that was in one game in the Premier League?
he had a hat
I
trick,
think.
yeah. hmm
Yeah.
Versus
So.
versus Leicester, yeah.
Oh, Leicester. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, he just hasn't had even before he got injured. He didn't have a good
Yeah.
start. A good start to the
Yeah. He's
season,
struggling to start. Yeah. It's weird. I don't know.
and he was like,
I don't know if he's
we.
tired because last year was a huge year for him.
I
But
remember arguing he was more important than Harry Kane to that
Kane.
team,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
that argument did not age well
Well, at the
at
time
all.
though, he could have been at the time for sure. But yeah, not now. Ooh. And he's not really even getting like assists now either.
Well,
So
well, he was so like it was weird. I think it was first Man City where he was in on goal, and I feel like the old Son would have taken someone on and immediately gotten the shot off. And what he did was he was looking to pass. Maybe it was Arsenal,
mm,
and it was a di- it was he was not aggressive at all. It was just
mhm.
it looked a different Son. I can't explain it. Um,
Yeah,
as far as
it's
players of the
weird.
season, obviously it's Kane. I put down Perisic, but this was before the Man City game, and he did not play well with Man City.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
yeah, really, there's not a whole lot to say after that. I mean, Kulishevsky, when he plays, is important for them. Um, though he didn't necessarily play his best game yesterday, but he's also been kind of hit and miss with injuries.
Yeah, yeah, especially as of late.
Yeah.
But yeah, when he's like firing, he's been great. But yeah, injuries have kind of like broken up his form for sure.
And so for positives, I did put they're in striking distance, and Son just completely been dormant this season. So maybe if Son can kind of wake up, you can kind of get them firing a little bit. I think Richarlison has to come good for them. He struggled with injuries, but I don't think he scored for them in the EPL. That needs to happen. And
Yeah, he looked great
Kulishevsky,
for Brazil in some games too.
uh, he really did. You're right.
Yeah, so I was expecting him to come out flying.
Yeah. So maybe that can happen. I mean, you look in midfield. Everything is about basically being defensive. And what's funny is you have to do that because the back line cannot play a high line. Lloris has mistakes in him, so I think the back line's kind of worried about that as well. But there's just a lack of
But yeah,
creativity in midfield. The way the team's structured is kind of weird. Um, we kind of mentioned that I think for the Boxing Day game versus Brentford, where the team is different when you're able to play the wingbacks kind of further up and actually play attacking football. But at the same time, you do that, you expose teams kind of going after your back three, and I think that's
yeah,
where
that's true.
that's where the problem is. Like it's funny. Arsenal got two players. I think Spurs should have gotten. I think Spurs should have gone for Trossard. I think Spurs should have gone for this Kiwa guy, even though I've never even heard of him at Spezia, because what I've read about him is he played center back in a back three specifically, and he played in all three of the was it Poland games
Yeah,
in the World Cup. So
yeah,
he's young and he's starting for his national team, and Poland was able to get into the knockout rounds. So
yeah. They're not. Yeah, they're a good team. And I believe he played defensive mid as well.
oh,
At
there you go.
least a couple times. So yeah, yeah, he
He's
could have helped.
versatile.
But yeah, I think Trossard would have definitely helped. And like some of their weird, like they got Basuma last year, and he hasn't really had an impact either.
Really, yeah.
Longley too. Longley's ho hum. I don't know. So
Longley
it's
had
kind
an
of weird.
awful mistake that led to the fourth goal from Mares.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that was bad.
and they brought in Spence. Spence wasn't even on the bench for
Oh, Spence.
the
Yeah,
game yesterday. And
yeah,
it looks like they're actually trying to get this guy Pedro Pera, Opora, of Sporting. He's a right back, so that definitely means it's not good times for Jed Spence. So
yeah. And he hasn't played at all. So you're kind of like, what is he not training hard or because we don't have we don't see him on the field. So I don't know. Maybe the coaches are seeing him not train hard or something. Because like I feel like he would play a little bit, and he's not even playing a little bit.
and one thing I woke up this morning to is it sounds like they're trying to hijack Annette Danjuma. Who basically he did a medical. He almost did everything that you're supposed to do for Everton, but it sounds like
Oh
he's trying.
gosh.
Danjuma is kind of game to join Spurs, and that would be that. I don't think I've ever remembered something like that before. Um,
Oh, that'd be crushing for Everton.
yeah, Everton need something,
Yeah, they
and
need something.
Danjuma. He played for Villarreal. I remember he scored or did very well versus Man United in a Champions League
He
game
scored a
last year.
bunch. Yeah, he scored a bunch of Champions League goals. Wasn't it like
He's got a lot of
10 or
pace. He's
something?
got a lot of pace to him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, he's a good player.
hearing them, I think he plays on the left side as well. So hearing that, it seems like they are a little bit worried about Son, to be honest. So I don't know. It's something to think about. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
but I kind of teased it a little bit. I feel like you're enjoying this a little bit, Rex.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know. They're I like that they don't like go out and like buy a bunch of players and just like fit them in. I like that they're like trying to find players. Just sometimes they don't hit. And I'm trying to figure out like what's going on with Son, and I just don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe he's tired. Man, I just don't know. But I still keep expecting him to like come good at some point this year because he's just too good of a player to keep down that long. But I mean, it's almost February now, so I don't know. It's just a weird team. It's a confusing team. Sometimes they look great, and even like some halves they look great, and the next half they look terrible. So I don't know. Just a confusing team. I'm perplexed by them for sure.
What do you think is a better chance, likelihood of happening? Um, Chelsea getting things right with Potter and make kind of a push and finishing above Spurs, or Spurs completely kind of flopping a little bit and maybe um, Conte leaves at the end of the season.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think Conte might leave. But I think I would back Tottenham to finish higher than Chelsea at this point.
Mhm.
Just because like I do feel better about Tottenham's like defense isn't great, but Conte is such a good like defensive organizer that I think that Tottenham's defense and Harry Kane would be enough to like to have them finish higher than Chelsea this year. But yeah, I mean, if they miss out on the Champions League, you think Conte's rope will be tight. I don't think they'll fire him unless they like
Oh, I
do
think
really bad.
it's almost like he would
But
walk. It just,
right.
I think, because I think he's done that in the past. But
Well, especially if he didn't get like if he wants players in the summer and he doesn't get them, then yeah, I could definitely see him walking for sure.
I mean, goal scored, they're 39, so that's third place. But they conceded with this kind of surprised me. With so they've conceded 31 goals so far with, I guess, like 20 games played, whatever it is, and that's 15th. And
Yeah.
you don't think of a Conte side being 15th when it comes to goals conceded.
Oh, not at all.
So
Yeah, he's
yeah.
such a good defensive coach.
Yeah.
Because like most of or in the beginning of the season, especially, we were saying, hey, like those defensive players, they're not good really, but they were still
You're right.
managing to get clean sheets and things like that.
Mhm.
And we thought that was just all down to Conte. But maybe now like the players are kind of catching up, and he's like, there's nothing I can do, and there's nothing I can do anymore with the players I got. Like I need other players.
Yep. And then so there, that's Spurs, and we're not going to go in order because there's a lot to say, at least with this team. And when I did this, Liverpool were actually close to Spurs in the table, but they're not. So in the ninth place, we do have Liverpool with 29 points. Um, again, to kind of recap how they've gone in the year 2023. They beat Leicester because of a route phase, 2 on goals, in hilarious fashion. They
Oh,
got clobbered by Brentford, and that was really like the big early uh-oh call. Van Dijk ended up kind of hurting himself as well. He'll now be out until I think the Real Madrid game in February. But it was one of those where you just saw the midfield was overrun. But the two, they lacked any kind of threat going forward. And then Gakpo got his debut, and he did help out, I think, in one of the goals. So they did draw Wolves 2-2. It was kind of unfortunate for Wolves because it almost felt like they won the game with like a weird offsides call that was like called back. And then
yeah.
really the troubling signs happened with the 3-0 loss to Brighton. And I texted Jeremy, Liverpool's going to lose. I think I said by 4 goals before the game happened, because I got the similar sense it was going to be exactly the same thing that happened with Napoli. Anytime they've gone up against physical midfields, they've gotten destroyed this year, and that unfortunately that happened again. One thing that's funny is Arsenal was able to beat Brighton 4-2, but in that game Moises Caicedo didn't play, and neither did Alexi McAllister. Um,
Yeah, that's true.
they were back for this game, and we're good. Sully Marsh got 2 goals. All of a sudden, he's starting to fire a ton for them. Matoma just completely destroyed Trent Alexander-Arnold after everyone kind of raving about his defensive performances versus Harvey Barnes versus Leicester. No, he did not look good versus Matoma. And yeah, it was one of those things that it felt like it was going to come. I thought they were going to score more, to be honest, for it to only lose 3-0. But that was the first game where you started to kind of worry a little bit about Gakpo coming in, because Gakpo doesn't seem to be he doesn't necessarily seem to have a lot of pace to his game, which is
Hmm.
weird because he's coming from a winger. But starting to kind of worry a little bit about what he was doing at Eredivisie. When Holland played or when the Dutch played, he was almost like a 10. He wasn't really one of their wide players. You could have looked at that being kind of an uh-oh sign.
Hmm.
So now again, you're doing this a little bit without Darwin Nunes, so that can kind of maybe that'll kind of change things. Henderson played in this game and was awful, and that's kind of been a recurring theme as well. And then they drew Chelsea 0-0. It was good to keep a clean sheet. They also beat Wolves in the FA Cup game where Batchett started, and Naby looked pretty good. It's probably the best midfield that they've looked in some time. They were able to beat
Hmm.
Wolves with the Harvey goal, and then with Chelsea, it was just a mess. So it was good to keep a clean sheet. But Klopp played Elliott left wing, and that is Elliott left wing, Gakpo in the middle, and then Salah, and that just it was probably the worst attack that they've looked at in a while. It was good to see the midfield look good. I think so far as Bacic can stay healthy, I think he needs to be a name on the 11. To be honest,
Yeah, he's been great.
if it can be Bacic, Thiago, and Keita, that can maybe salvage the season. That's a good enough midfield to do that. They do get Jota, I think, later this month. They don't get Diaz probably till March. That'll probably be too late by then. But a lot of the issues have kind of come from that. And then in this game for Chelsea, the front line just made poor decisions. Everyone was just kind of trying to shoot at will and just
Yeah.
not getting anything on goal. Um, as far as goals scored, they're at 34, so they're in fifth. So they conceded 25, sixth, and the top goal scorer is Salah and Firmino on 7 goals. Darwin's on 5, and I do fear that Darwin's best attribute is kind of running down the left side, but he was brought in to be played in the middle. It's not what brought him for. They have Diaz to kind of play on the left side. And it's just one of those things where it's possible that they misprofiled on him because he had Mane doing this last year, and yeah, oh well. As far as players of the season go, I put injuries, and then I put FHG ownership. I don't have a player.
Ooh.
I don't have a player of the season. Um,
Hmm.
if this season ends with getting new owners, this will be worth it. But if they don't, it's catastrophic because again, the way these owners operate on is player sales, and you don't have assets to sell other than like Luis Diaz or Jota or maybe Salah, and you do that, you lose the club. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't
definitely.
I don't want to go on a full rant, but I am going to rant a little bit. What are you? I'll let you kind of have your say first. What are your thoughts on Liverpool so far?
Yes, I think they need more engines in the midfield, and I mean, we talked about at the beginning of the year how like Klopp's gig and pressing system it just tires out players. So you really need to recycle like some of these players and bring in new young fresh legs because it's a lot of running. And it's a lot of running, especially in the middle of the pitch. And that's where they need it the most. Like you said, like Fabinho's no spring chicken. He needs help. I mean, you got like Milner, Henderson, older guys. You need some replacement players. I mean, like they had Wijnaldum. They got rid of him. They could have used him for sure. So they really are a team that they need to keep some of the core players, like like you said, Salah, Robertson, Van Dijk, Trent Alexander-Arnold. Keep some of those core players, but really bring in some young guys in the engine room. I know he's been trying, like Bacetic has been great. Elliott sometimes is up there. I don't know, he's more of an attacking player, but
Right.
they just need like some good engines in there in the midfield.
I you mentioned definitely. I'm going to get to Elliot. I think he can maybe do a job. But I think he's a winger, and he doesn't really.
Hmm.
He's a winger that plays on the left side that has a left foot, so he plays inverted. That's fine. He doesn't have the pace that Salah has, but at least you can you can make him work there. I don't think he can play as a midfielder. I don't think he has the defensive work rate. And he gets bullied. He doesn't have the dual success rate.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true.
so yeah, I don't want to necessarily rant for 10 minutes, but not addressing the midfield at least in this January window is a squad that'll finish closer to 10th place than top four. I
Ooh.
just think it's that bad. I mean,
Mm.
there are players maybe out there you can maybe try to do a loan for. I think Frank Kessie of Barcelona is available.
It'd be great.
I don't necessarily know how much money they can spend if they can spend any money. Um, the, the the fans wanted or believed that Moses Caicedo was going to happen. That's clearly not. This idea that they're going to spend 120 million on Bellingham in the summertime, I think, is a pipe dream. I think it's stupid as well because you
Yeah.
need multiple midfielders, not just one. I would go get USA's Yunus Musa or Manuel Ugarte of Sporting. Both guys that are both young, but also have legs for days, and both that are
Mhm.
very good at they're versatile. They're good with the ball at their feet. They're not just dual monsters, even though they do win the ball back. But they're clever on the ball. It has a little bit of what Genie had. Um, it's maybe you can look at it somewhere in South America. Man City just bought Maximilian Perrin of
Mhm.
in the Argentina league. It's just maybe you can try to be clever that way, but it requires having competent scouting, and I think that's kind of the issue. They don't have that anymore. As far as the midfield goes, Klopp's asking players to do things that they can't do anymore. You kind of mentioned that. So win duels, counter press,
Yeah.
win the ball back. You can't do that. It's not just one thing to press and kind of have energy and to be annoying. To win the ball back takes a lot of energy because you have to do it without fouling. And it's one thing that he used to always have. He had masters at that. He doesn't have that anymore. But another thing too is you have to close gaps left by the fullbacks by playing high. So when Trent goes out of position, that leaves all the space over here, and they've been able to get by it lately with Kanate being back. Kanate has kind of been asked to kind of play out wide and close stuff down because you don't have people in midfield that can do that anymore.
Yeah.
Obviously Henderson has just lost his engine. He made some interview today saying
Ooh.
the World Cup took stuff out of me. He's been a wash player for a while. It's not just the World
Yeah.
Cup, and
Yeah. He's old.
he averages less than 2 tackles a game, and positionally he's a nightmare. When he plays on the right side, he plays in the middle, which leaves that entire right side open, which leaves Trent when he goes up to be exposed. You're asking Salah to maybe track back, and I don't want Salah making those runs either because I want Salah to save his legs to go forward.
Mhm.
It's a worst dual. The midfield's the worst dual success rate in the league,
Ooh.
which is stunning. But when you look, Henderson's playing, Milner's playing, Fabinho lost his legs. Thiago and Keita and Thiago don't get to play together that often. Harvey Elliott is a winger. Curtis Jones is maybe he'll work later on. I don't think he's ready.
Yeah.
He looks slow. It's possible Curtis Jones is kind of a misprofiled winger as well. Arthur they brought in as a loan deal. He's been a disaster. Obviously, he
Yeah.
something happened
Terrible.
with his knee. You can't necessarily deal with that. But you brought in someone that was overweight and someone that had injury issues before. So this is what you get for.
Yeah.
It's possible he'll return
Absolutely.
and come good, but maybe not. And then you have this young kid, Bacic. And if they didn't have Bacic playing and playing well, playing amazing, to be honest, the situation would be even worse than it is. But even though it's not good, I mean, Bacic has come in and he's able to play in the Fabinho role. Um,
Mhm.
he looks very good
Yeah.
for being already
Just
being very young.
get one or two more players like him, and you could probably start to change things around, and or at least level the ship until you can get more signings in a summer window.
I mean, just again, I mean, the status of the ownership is kind of a problem because like the owners operate Liverpool like they're Southampton, or just, I don't want to
Mhm.
necessarily to take go after a smaller club, but it's a buy to sell policy, and I think it's outdated. You waste too many windows by not keeping the squad fresh. They've only bought one midfielder, I think it was Thiago, since they won the Champions League. Like that was like 4 years
Mhm.
ago.
Yeah.
It's too many windows to just let everyone else catch up to you. And during that time, what's also happened is the league is caught up. The league knows how you're going to press. The league knows how you're going to play. And what the league's done is they've adapted. They've brought in players that are more press resistant. So that requires
Mhm.
more more energy to try to turn you over. And
Yeah,
I mean,
they know how to play it now.
another thing too is they allowed all the front stars to run down their contracts. Mane basically left for free. No, Mane wasn't going to resign, so they sold him for his last year on his contract. Firmino is on his last year. They Salah had to be extended last year. And
Hmm.
what's funny is, they let Genie Wijnaldum go. You mentioned Genie, and they extended Henderson. I think you should have done the reverse or let both go.
Yeah.
And the problem is they extended Henderson after they won the title, and everyone loved him, and so it was
Hmm.
hard to do it at that point.
Definitely.
Henderson was doing his Henderson shuffle when they were winning cup after cup, and so he was beloved at that point. But he was never really the most technical player. I've always kind of talked. I've called him Hooferson. He's a player that likes to get the ball upfield, but he just anytime when he's kind of close into the final third, he's technically deficient. And
Yeah.
what always kind of made up for it was his engine. He was very good at running back. He would cover for Trent. He would win duels, and he can't do that anymore. He when he plays, he points. He points at people to make runs for him, and it's a problem. Um,
Yeah. Definitely.
the change from Michael Edwards to doing transfer policy is different, and it's been detrimental. I've ranted about it before, but to only focus on Tchouaméni and Bellingham has been again it's been a disaster. The obsession with Bellingham is even more dumb. And I'm starting to see that if it's not going to be Bellingham, maybe it'll be Mateus Nunes of Wolves, or I'm seeing Mason Mount's name all of a sudden pop up as an alternative.
Ooh,
I do not want
interesting.
Mason Mount, as weird as that is to say, because I think Mason Mount at Chelsea is starting to kind of, Chelsea fans have kind of started to harp on him a little bit. And after watching him versus Liverpool, I understand why. I don't think he's a midfielder.
Mm.
When he's played at Chelsea, he's either been a 10 or he's been kind of like a left-sided attacker for them, further
Yeah.
upfield. And Liverpool have Diaz and Jota, and you have Darwin or Gakpo who like playing there anyways. So you don't need that. And so, yeah, I would prefer a name like Yusuf Fofana if you're not going to get Casado
Mm.
at Monaco. I mentioned Ugarte or Yunus Musa. I mean, there are players out there that you can target that aren't necessarily the big
Super
splashy
expensive.
name, but would work.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Definitely.
another thing too is that the Darwin Nunes and Gakpo signing have been weird. The Fabio Carvalho signing's been weird. Liverpool did not play with a 10. You brought in a 5'8", 5'7", 130 pound, 15-year-old or 19-year-old in Fabio Carvalho to I don't know where he plays. You can't play him in midfield. He gets bullied. He does. You can try him on left wing, but he's another guy where you've got that position covered. You've got five guys that like playing that role. Um, it's been a weird signing. I think you got him because he was cheap, and that's it.
Yeah. I think so.
There's been a story that they basically did a pre-agreement with Mateus Nunes when he went to Wolves. They have a they have a buy-in clause after a year. So that's insane to
Mm.
me. You could have bought him last year and you didn't. If
Yeah.
you just spent money to bring in Cody Gakpo, why? If you're not going to buy a
Yeah.
midfielder as well, why? You didn't need him.
Yeah. They need Nunez now. Not who knows what they'll be in the summer.
and
Yeah.
and
That's frustrating.
I was one of those that actually, when it happened, I liked the idea, and I was attacking people that had that opinion because I thought, well, you're going to get a midfielder as well. Surely they're not going to do this again, and it looks like they are. Um,
Mm.
it's been 100, but it's not just the ownership. 150 million have been spent on Diaz, Nunes, and Gakpo. All that time, Tyler Adams, Bruno Guimaraes, Mateus Nunes, Lucas Paqueta, Enzo Fernandez, Zambo Anguissa, Paulinho, and Boubacar Kamara have all moved to different clubs for under $40 million, and
Mhm.
that's just naming a few. Um,
Yeah.
and it's just there are players out there, and Enzo Laffi, Kefim Terem, um, Yao Gomez at Flamingo. Uh, you could be scouted, and it doesn't feel like they're even being scouted at the minute. And you look at what Brighton's been doing. There's a way to build a squad where you don't have to spend $400 million, and
Mhm.
it seems like Liverpool do not have money to spend, and the players that they're targeting are all over $100 million each. I keep hearing Bellingham. Um,
Mm.
it's frustrating. I keep hearing Casado. In the summertime, it was Tchouaméni. And
Mm,
so I don't get what the club is doing. It's run very very poorly, and it's weird to say because it used to be known as it used to be praised as the best run club, and
mhm.
it's not. I mean, the frontline issues, they're making Salah a creative touchline player. Salah is back to not really using his right foot. I think teams know how to play him. Darwin's taking time to get settled. He's got the most missed chances in the league.
Yeah.
Um, so he's creating chances. That's good, but he's missing. And he played in a two striker system at Benfica. He played with that guy for Portugal that ended up getting a hat trick, um, Ramos.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Ramos, yeah,
And so he didn't play in this kind of system. He didn't play as the lead man, and he's taken some time to get used to that. Obviously, the Jota and Diaz injuries are hurting, especially Jota. I mean, Jota kind of fixes everything. Jota is just he's so clever with his runs in the box. He finishes chances in a way that they just haven't had that. They were able to get away with that last year because Mane was doing that again last year.
yeah,
And
yeah. True.
I don't want to say selling Mane was the wrong idea, but if the idea was to sell Mane and replace him with Darwin Nunes, that hasn't worked out. You did not profile that player right. So it's there've been in the press there've been some press issues. Um, yeah, it just the planning hasn't necessarily been proper. With the back line again, I think Gomez is actually misprofiled. I think he's a right back, not really center back. But
Yeah.
he's got to play now at center back because of Virgil being out for a couple of weeks. Kanate missed the first part of the season. Why? Because Klopp scheduled a friendly a day after they beat Man City in the
Mm,
Community Shield game, and Kanate got hurt that day. As far as the fullbacks, Trent Alexander-Arnold hasn't had the best start to the season, and I think I've mentioned that before. I think he's been asked to do too much. I frankly, until the midfield is fixed, I do think he should be the right CM. I would move him up. I would do it now. Maybe
okay.
I guess he can't because Gomez has to play until Virgil gets back.
Yeah.
When Van Dijk gets back, I would do that. I would make this change now. I think I've mentioned that before. And then another problem too is Robinson and Simikas. Simikas is not the same player that Robertson is. Robertson has an engine that Simikas doesn't. Simikas played versus Brentford and looked awful. Where it seems like you misprofiled him as well. I mean, it's just everything is different. Klopp's teams used to have the most energy, high pacing. He called it rock and roll football, and you don't have that anymore. And
Yeah.
you're trying to do that with players that do not have the legs to do that anymore. Because, like you said, they ran ragged for him for 5 years, and eventually age and injuries and all this other joints it catches up to you. And it's not a way to run a football club to not reinvest, to not keep the squad fresh. If nothing else, bring a player in or two to keep the squad hungry.
Yeah.
Because they've won it. Another thing too, this team has won everything you can. Um, and it's not easy to kind of motivate yourself when you're a little bit older. You have a family, you have other things on your mind, and that's just human nature. But again, there's so many windows where they just didn't bring in anyone, and they just allowed everything to kind of be lazy daisy, and they've gotten away with it in the past, and I think it's finally going to catch up with them. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
and so I mean that's kind of sorry, that's my little rant on Liverpool. We'll move on to Fulham. We'll see how we are doing for time. Actually, oh shit, we're not doing too great for time.
No.
Sorry about that. So Fulham, we're there in they have 31 points, seventh place. So they've beaten Southampton. They beat Southampton 2-0. Beat Leicester City 1-0. Beat Chelsea. That was kind of the surprise. They beat Chelsea without Mitrovic, with goals from William and Vinicius. And then they lost to Newcastle 1-0, and then lost yesterday. Goals, they're at 32 goals, and then conceded. They're in 14th place for conceded, so that's still a bit of an issue. But the top scorer is Mitrovic with 11. But player of the season is, I mentioned maybe Pope being signing of the season. Paulinho is maybe a decent call for that as well, because he's come in
Yeah.
and been amazing for them. And again, he was relatively
It's been
cheap when he
great.
came in. Yeah.
Yeah. Someone Liverpool could have gotten probably or should have because he's been great. Big engine room guy. He's a big reason why Fulham are where they are. Same with like Caicedo and Brighton. Big time player scouted from where did he come from? Portugal, Sporting Lisbon. Is that where
Yeah,
he was?
somewhere in Portugal. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, huge player for them.
I mean, he leads the league in tackles and ground duels, and I just did basically a
Cool.
rant on Liverpool not having that. The
Hmm.
concerns are they are reliant on Mitrovic bagging for them, um, and the numbers again, the defensive numbers aren't necessarily great. And then I mentioned how Allison was like third when it came to saves mid. Leno, I think, was was in front of him a little bit. So it's Ray and then Leno. So teams are getting a lot of looks on them. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
but I mean, it's a fantastic job that Marco Silva has done. So definitely credit there. And basically, William looks a different player playing full. Looks like he's
Yeah,
got his info
so
back.
weird.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
does.
bizarre.
All right, we'll move on to Brighton. They're in eighth place, 31 points. The Arsenal game, 4-2 loss, but they turned around and destroyed Everton. And then beat Liverpool. Then did it without Trossard, but the passing patterns and the way they exploited space was not fair. And then maybe a little surprise is they were only able to draw Leicester 2-2. And they actually needed a goal from Evan Ferguson to get that draw.
Hmm.
Matoma again had a worldie.
Yeah,
But
he's been fantastic.
the goals scored, I think I have 37, so in sixth place, and then 27 goals conceded. Um, but I think the positive is it's harder to think of a better team a team that's playing better football than Brighton, or Arsenal obviously, or a good argument, but the way that it is very similar to Arsenal because they don't necessarily play positional football. It is very positionless. And the way that they keep the ball versus press and find space to exploit is impressive. And I don't know. I'll kind of throw this out there. Have Brighton upgraded their manager after losing Potter?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing is we were kind of worried about when Powder left. We were like, man, we kind of like what we're seeing out of Brighton. We like these players how they're playing, and I think they have upgraded honestly. But again, I mean that's like I don't know. It's kind of like Trzerbi's come in and done well, and you know, what's his face has gone on to Chelsea and done. Potter's gone on to Chelsea and done terrible. So I think it's an upgrade, but it's certainly not. It's not a downgrade with De Zerbi at all. There, at least he's got Brighton to like what Potter was doing at least.
Yep.
So I don't know. I think he is better than Potter. But that might, again, that might just be because Chelsea and Potter they're not going so well right now. But it's definitely not a downgrade. They did really well to lose like a key, a key guy for so long like Potter, and to come in and replace him with someone that is equal, if not better. It's a huge thing to do. And got people. How many clubs are looking for coaches, good coaches, and this guy was available and Brighton got him. And Everton, maybe Villa, a bunch of other teams were probably like, "Dang it, we could have gotten him possibly. We should have." And
Hmm.
now it's Brighton's win.
I mean, they scored 17 goals in the last 6 games. I remember like the thing with Potter at Brighton was their issue was I mean they were always good structurally,
Hmm.
but their issue was kind of sometimes scoring a lot of goals. Like they always underperformed their xG. There's a
Yeah.
quote by Adam Lallana that I think is pretty interesting. So like
Oh
naturally,
yeah.
naturally, when you have a coach that likes possession style, you maybe think of Pep. But basically, he said De Zerbi isn't as rigid or adamant about players kind of staying in the same positions. There's more freedom to play, kind of positionless football. But and basically, he said the idea is to kind of run where the space is. Again, the teammate has to recognize when to shift and when to cover. But another thing too is whenever they play, they like having a passing triangle at all times. So like you'll sometimes see, when people do like highlight videos or whatever, you'll kind of see the
Hmm.
triangle move. And whenever Brighton are trying to do a passing pattern, it doesn't seem like a player's by themselves, which
Yeah,
is interesting.
that's true. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, very true.
and another thing to kind of say, and this is not necessarily deserving, but just the entire recruiting and scouting board. I mean, they've Casado, Alexis McAllister, Estupian, Matoma, again, Evan Ferguson. They found Trossard for I think the Belgian league, and they've decided to move him on like he's nothing. Sorry, Mento came on and played really well versus Everton. He looks like Roberto Firmino.
Yeah,
And I don't. What other club would be able to lose Potter, Yves Bissouma, Mark Cucurella, Ben White, and arguably improve everywhere?
yeah,
One name I haven't even said is Levi Colwell. And this guy apparently is number
Mhm.
4 when it comes to pass success rates in the entire league.
Yeah.
He had like a 90% completion rate versus Liverpool. I don't think he lost a duel. I was
Yeah.
talking to
He
Jeremy.
he could be one for the future.
Maybe he'll be a way for Liverpool to kind of exploit because he's young and he was amazing.
Mhm. Yeah, and they brought him along kind of slowly. They did it the right way. Didn't overwhelm him. Because I think we talked about him in like a season before the season preview. I think we talked about him, and I think we at least talked about how we were kind of surprised he wasn't playing.
Yep.
But now it looks great. Hindsight's 2020, but gonna ease him in, and he gets his feet wet little by little, and he's looking really good, and he could be another player that we kind of are like, where did he come from? It's the same with like Caicedo, Estupinan, all these guys. You're kind of like, whoa, where'd that guy come from? Matoma.
Mhm.
So it's awesome, man. It's awesome to see. Matoma's been awesome as well, and it's different people are scoring. Like Welbeck even scored a couple games ago. So different guys are scoring as well. It's awesome, and I'm glad that they haven't stepped down a level after losing Potter.
And it just feels like everything about that club is like forward thinking. I feel like if they did sell Casado, they'd have his replacement.
And they just make money and have a guy already ready to go.
It's impressive. I think like the entire squad is like less than I think it's made up with less than 150 million. Um, and yeah, I mean, it just credit to how they're running right now. I think it's them and Napoli or maybe the two. Well, you can mention Arsenal, but Arsenal would be a club, so it is what it is. I think they're the two most exciting prospects or projects happening right now in world football.
Mm.
Because Napoli's kind of done a little bit of a rebuild, kind of shuffling out Koulibaly and then bringing in bringing like I don't I don't remember necessarily his name, but he's from he plays for Japan or South Korea. Uh, uh,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I forget
but
his name.
they've
Ken,
like they've
Ken.
like they've like turned around and brought in and done a rebuild themselves, and they didn't spend a lot of money to do it. And
Mhm.
they're as high flying as anyone right now.
They're a fun team to watch. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. Osmahen and they have Zelensky,
Zelensky's good.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Zelensky. Yeah, they're fun to watch. I admittedly don't watch a lot of them unless they're on in the Champions League, but they got some good players. They're fun.
And so to kind of round out the top 10, we do have Brentford. They're on 30 points, so they're in front of Liverpool. Let's see. And they beat West Ham 2-1, beat Liverpool 3-1. And then they got the 2-0 win over Bournemouth with goals from Tony and Jensen. And then they kind of flopped a little bit versus Leeds. But you can kind of it was almost a chance to win 4 in a row in the league. They lost to West Ham in the FA Cup game.
Yeah,
But this surprised me. So they're at 32 goals. They're at eighth for goals, goals scored. And you mentioned after losing Ericsson, you definitely wouldn't have expected that.
hmm
And they've been carried by Ivan Toney with 13 goals.
yeah, definitely.
And 28 goals conceded. And players of the season, it's definitely Toney, but Ben Mee maybe. Ben Mee's been a very good signing for them. And then
Yeah, he's been underrated for sure.
they haven't had Christian or Norgard for like they missed a lot of him like during the World Cup. But hey, all of a sudden him coming back. I looked at his stats. I'll kind of bring this out later. They're amazing.
Yeah, he's
He's
great.
quite a player. Yeah.
Yeah, he could be. He's underrated. I mean, a lot of their players are underrated. But I mean, last year we kind of talked about. I think Jeremy mentioned like he could be one of the better like defensive midfielders in the Premier League. You just don't really hear much about him because he's at a smaller club. But he's great, and he's him having him back and healthy is really important.
I mean, just he was spectacular versus Liverpool. Just kind of like the long balls he was having, just everything seemed to be kind of. He was always looking up. He was always trying to find Tony or Mbemba making a run. But
Mhm.
last season he was so for tackles made he was first in the entire league. For duels won he was 13th. For recoveries he was second, and then he was top 5 for blocked passes.
Yeah.
That's for everyone.
Mhm.
So I mean those stats really do pop out at you.
Yeah, yeah, he's been great.
And
And
then
big like engine room guy too.
yep.
Another point there for you with the teams that are surging ahead, having like that pivotal defensive midfielder there that's working hard, and if he can go deep pivotal balls over the top, that's just an added bonus.
Right, he's good. He's good on the ball with his feet. He's a good passer.
Hmm.
Um, which is important too, because I remember that used to be kind of Brentford's bugaboo. They were a poor passing side.
Yeah.
What do you think of the signing that they brought in with Kevin Schroeder?
I think he's pretty good. He's ridiculously fast. I played them at on FIFA.
Oh,
He's
nice.
like 90. He's like 94 sprint speed.
Oh,
He's a little like young, a little raw, but I think he's a great backup option for Tony. We've already seen him kind of give Tony breaks in some games, which is nice because you don't. They do rely a lot on Tony, so you got to keep him fresh. You got to keep him healthy. And this is a great, cheap alternative option. And I think he has the ability to play, other places besides striker. Just with that speed he has,
hmm.
he's very direct, straight to goal. We haven't seen too much of him yet. I mean, they just got him. But in his little cameos, he looks pretty good. I think he's a good backup option, and he didn't cost a whole heck of a lot.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because yeah, I think a couple weeks ago we were kind of worried maybe the investigation was going to come out, but that's kind of
Yeah,
since kind of paused a little bit. Um,
yeah, might
so,
be
so, so you didn't know
over the summer
if this
thing,
was
but
insurance or not, but you're right. Yeah, I do think it's forward thinking and it's good. It's good to see.
mhm.
All right, and then we'll move on to Chelsea at 10th. Maybe we'll just do the top 10 and kind of not focus on.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll do that. That'll be good. So we'll just do the top 10. We'll end with Chelsea, and then we don't really have to talk about the sides and relegation. We'll maybe save that for later.
yeah.
Um,
We can do the bottom 10 next time.
because I mean the league's got on a little bit of a break. So if we do a
Yeah,
show next week, we can kind of
FA,
we can
FA
think.
Cups.
Yeah, we can stick back with this, and then maybe touch a little bit of what happened with the FA Cup game.
Yeah, that
Um,
sounds good.
all right. So with Chelsea, they are in 10th place, also with 29 points. I don't really know how they do this. Or maybe it's games played or not, but I'll take it. So
Yeah, I
Liverpool
don't
in ninth.
know.
Um, oh, it's still in front of Chelsea. Uh, but they've had a weird even before the World Cup. Before this, so they beat. I don't. Maybe they don't have a win. Before the draw to Liverpool, they'd gone like 9 in a row, almost losing. I think maybe they had a draw in there or something. Oh, they drew Forest. They drew Forest 1-1, but they had a bunch of losses in a row. I mean, two to Man City. That is what it is. I thought there was a Kepa mistake on the Grealish cross in that Man City game. But I mean, the big shock was losing to Fulham without Mitrovic. And
Yeah.
it happened because like Felix got a red card. But there's another one that like, you lost Sakari had to get an injury, so it was just kind of just a lot of bad things happened all at once. But I think what was interesting is before they added Mudrick, I thought their issue was it was a very imbalanced squad. Other than Reece James and Chilwell, you didn't really have anyone that was going to make a run ahead, who had pace, who had something to like scare a defender. Mudrick
Yeah.
definitely has that, and
Oh yeah.
Felix does as well. When you get Felix back. Havertz doesn't have that. Mason Mount doesn't. Christian Pulisic got hurt versus Man City. But even at the same time, Pulisic's fast, like running with the ball, but he's not going to make a run in ahead, a run in behind. He doesn't have like sprinter pace to him. And then maybe Sterling
Yeah.
has that, but it's really it. So Mudrick definitely balances out the squad a little bit more, and it'll be interesting to see what David Fofana does because he's kind of come in and he's a little bit of an unknown. So
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know much about him, honestly.
yeah, um, and this kind of shows you where Potter feels the squad is. He started to play Lewis Hall a little bit more, and I don't necessarily. I don't necessarily think he's kind of profiled to kind of be a fullback either. He looks pretty good as like maybe a midfielder. He's tight on the ball, but he's made defensive
Mhm.
issues. But yeah, they did draw Liverpool 1-1. I mean 0-0, goalless. And I didn't really think they offered. I mean, they did score. I think Havertz. It was ruled offsides, but that was off like a free kick goal. They didn't really offer anything in the open play until Mudrick came on, and then Mudrick came on and just he completely terrorized everything. Liverpool were playing James Milner at right back, and
Yeah.
it was
He
interesting
really
that
did.
it was interesting Potter didn't bring Mudrick on earlier because there was a time where Mudrick had like a sprint to kind of beat Milner, and Milner just immediately just he was just like I'm not gonna do my hamstring. He just did everything he could to take him out. It's just one of those Milner specials.
Yeah. He really did.
He was just
He
like
really
he was
did.
just like I'll take the yellow. He like looked at the ref and he was like, so
Yep.
yeah.
Professional foul.
I mean, goals scored. They're not scoring enough. They're 22 goals. So 13th place. Conceded, they're in 4th place.
Yeah.
So they've been good that way. But the top scorers, Havertz and Sterling, both on 4. So,
Ooh.
um,
Yeah.
and again, so player of the
Not
season,
great.
I put down Todd Bowley. I put down the runner. Um, I mean,
Another the money. Yeah.
what do you think?
Oh man, that's really hard. I would probably go. I don't know. I guess Tiago when healthy.
That's a good, yeah.
Tiago Silva.
I'll take that.
I mean, definitely not any of their offensive players. Really, they're just too inconsistent.
hmm I mean, it's just it's funny. It's like it's never a good thing when you change a manager like midpoint in the season. You basically changed it after 5 games. You spent
Hmm.
$300 million on Tuchel's like recommendations, and then you're like, nope, nope, never mind.
Start
Um,
over. Yeah.
yeah,
And now you got play like Sterling's not. He's hurt, but he hasn't hit the ground running. Aubameyang. You got some players you're gonna have to get rid of now. You got some players that aren't gonna be happy.
I mean, so the positives is Felix and Budrick is completely going to change how they attack. So they could go up the table. To be honest, they're going to get Chilwell and
Yeah.
James back. We don't know if they'll be able to stay healthy. But if they can, that obviously changes how they attack as well. I mentioned that the squad being imbalanced, the midfield is kind of imbalanced.
Mhm.
It's I don't think Jorginho is probably gonna. He'll probably walk. I think he's maybe his last year on his contract. They have Dennis Zakaria, who's come in, I think, on loan, but he's hurt. And you don't really know who Conte is. We haven't seen Conte all season.
Yeah.
It's like Conor Gallagher doesn't really. He can't really play in that deeper role. He's more of a offensive minded attacking midfielder. Um,
Definitely.
it feels like they're maybe kind of missing on that. So like they are linked to Enzo Fernandez. If they do get him, this team will finish in the top 4. I think.
Mhm.
I think they'd shoot up, but that's a lot of ifs.
A lot of money to spend too.
That would
Gosh. Crazy money.
financial fair play. Be like, where are the feds? Where are
Yeah,
the
seriously.
where's the UEFA? Um, but it does feel like they're missing that. They're missing someone that can kind of link between the defense and kind of be a deep lying midfielder. That can
Yeah.
sustain pressure, but also win duels and be kind of cover for the back line. Because another thing that's kind of an issue is, that Koulibaly hasn't necessarily worked out. Koulibaly is not what Antonio Rudiger is, and Wesley Fofana has been hurt. You spend a lot of money for him, and it's not your fault that he's hurt, but he is. And
Yeah.
Chalobah is not. He's not really a suitable replacement. So it's
Mhm.
funny. You
And
had
he
Levy
might be hurt now
Colwell.
too.
You had Levy Colwell, and you decided to ship him out to loan. And I think maybe
Yeah.
you'll have him next year, but you could probably use him now.
Yeah, totally.
Um, that's I guess that's it for Chelsea. Yeah, so over the last 9 games, going back to the Arsenal game, they have 1 win over Bournemouth and then a draw versus Forest, and then the rest are losses. So,
Ooh.
yeah, I mean, what's funny is Felix, I think, is only on loan. I don't know if it's by,
Mm. He is.
I don't know if it's a buy with as well, but
Loan to buy. I don't think it
yeah,
is, but
okay, but so you only have Felix for I guess what this season,
mhm.
but and you have Mudrick. But what's interesting is you're going to they've already kind of put pen to paper on bringing in Christopher Nkuku. So
Jeez,
the attack next year is going to be wild. And again, this is going to be like $500 million spent in like a year. Um, so
unbelievable, really.
it is wild. But hey, you've got an owner that wants to just kind of I don't know if it's money laundering. He wants to just get
Could
rid of
be
his
with
money.
that amount. Jesus.
I don't know what it is.
It's
Um,
crazy.
and you've got such a big squad. I mean, personally, if Chelsea need to sell players to kind of make some of this up, I would take before Liverpool being linked to a Mount. I would take Conor Gallagher. I think Gallagher would
Yeah,
work in a Klopp system. I would want
yeah.
him over someone like Mount. But someone like Hakeem Ziyech is probably gonna have to go. I think they're gonna have to get rid of Pulisic. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
So there's a lot of
Yeah,
turnover
injury
that's probably
problems
going to
too.
happen with Chelsea. But I don't think, a bit like we said with some other teams, I don't think we've heard the last of them because some of these, Mudrik's going to be a really good signing for them. I fear.
Yeah. Yeah, well, if that little cameo is any indication, yeah, he's going to be a handful for sure.
And Kepa's been playing because of their other starter Mendy has been hurt. And Kepa's had a couple mistakes in him as well, and they've been kind of losing points that way. So, yeah, I don't necessarily think this is. I don't. You can't put a lot of this on Potter, but at the same
Yeah.
time, you are seeing some of the same issues where they're not scoring enough. Um, so I don't know if Potter's necessarily the person to fix that, other than bringing in new players, which it seems that's what they've done.
Yeah.
We'll see how it works.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
And so that's it. So we won't do a 3 hour show. We'll just do a little bit over two. Um, thank you again, Rex. Stars, thank you for pushing through that. I've actually I feel like my voice is sore after all that talking. So what we'll do next week is we'll try to maybe talk a little bit USA because they do kind of return again. There's no EPL for like I think 2 weeks, so we've got a
Yeah.
little break to this, and we'll try to hit on the other side of this, so the relegation contenders, we'll say.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's heating up too.
it is because
Yeah, the bottom is just as interesting as the top.
it's not just 3 or 4 to talk about. I think I put down 6.
It's like 5 or 16.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is. So plenty to still get to. We're not just gonna only talk about Liverpool and Chelsea. Um, we did spend
And Arsenal.
the most of that, and Arsenal. But yeah, it's I mean it's good to do another show. I'm sure we'll get more used to it again, and so yeah, we'll return next week, and no more pauses. We don't think, but anyways,
No. Yeah, the voice held up. It's good to be back though.
good to see you again, Rex, and yeah, I guess we'll return next week. So yeah, same time, and that'll be that. So from us to at the reserve squad, you stay squatting
Stay squatty.
and stop recording.